Have you ever noticed something strange about the way most people live their lives? They spend years trying to become someone else. They hide their fears, ignore their emotions, and constantly chase a version of themselves they believe will finally be worthy of peace. But no matter how far they run, one thing always follows them everywhere: their own mind. Buddhist wisdom teaches a truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The more you run from who you are, the more suffering you create. But the moment you stop running and finally face yourself honestly, something powerful begins to happen. In this video, we will explore 7 Buddhist lessons that reveal why self-acceptance is not weakness, but the beginning of true inner freedom. 1. The person you are fighting is yourself. Many people believe their biggest struggles come from other people or difficult situations in life. They think their suffering is caused by criticism, rejection, or circumstances that feel unfair. But very often the real struggle is happening inside the mind. People constantly judge themselves, replay past mistakes, and compare their lives with others. This creates an inner conflict where the mind fights against itself. Buddhist teachings explain that much of our suffering comes from resisting who we are in the present moment. When the mind constantly tells itself that it should be different, better, or more successful before it deserves peace, it creates endless pressure. But when you stop fighting yourself and begin observing your thoughts with awareness, the mind slowly becomes calmer. The battle inside you begins to dissolve, and understanding replaces self-judgment. 2. The mind creates the masks you hide behind. Many people feel the need to appear strong, confident, or successful in front of others. Because of this, they slowly begin creating identities that are designed to impress the world rather than reflect who they truly are. A person might act confident even when they feel insecure, pretend to be happy when they are struggling inside, or hide their true thoughts because they fear being judged. Over time, the mind learns to build these different versions of itself, adjusting behavior depending on the people or situations around it. For example, someone may act one way at work, another way with friends, and a completely different way when they are alone. They constantly observe how others expect them to behave and try to fit into those expectations. At first, this may seem helpful because it helps people feel accepted, but slowly, it creates pressure. The person begins feeling like they must always maintain an image instead of simply being themselves. Over time, these masks become exhausting because the mind is always trying to protect them. You begin worrying about what others think, trying to avoid mistakes, and constantly checking whether you are living up to the image you created. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that these identities are temporary constructions of the mind. They are roles we play, not the true nature of who we are. When you stop trying to perform for others and allow yourself to be honest about your thoughts, feelings, and experiences, something important begins to happen. The mind relaxes because it no longer has to pretend. Instead of constantly protecting an image, you begin living more naturally and peacefully. Authenticity replaces the exhausting effort of pretending to be someone else, and this honesty creates a deeper sense of inner freedom. 3. Your imperfections are teachers, not enemies. Many people spend a large part of their lives trying to hide their imperfections. They feel uncomfortable about their fears, their insecurities, their anger, or the mistakes they made in the past. Because of this, they try to ignore these parts of themselves or pretend they do not exist. The mind begins to believe that these weaknesses are something shameful, something that must be hidden from the world. But Buddhist wisdom teaches a very different perspective. Instead of seeing imperfections as enemies, they can be seen as teachers that help us understand our own mind. Every difficult emotion or mistake carries a lesson if we are willing to observe it honestly. For example, anger can reveal where we feel hurt or misunderstood. Fear can show us what we truly care about, or what we are afraid to lose. Even failure can teach patience, humility, and resilience. When we avoid these experiences, we also avoid the wisdom they contain. Running away from our imperfections only keeps us trapped in the same patterns again and again. But when we begin looking at ourselves with awareness instead of judgment, the relationship with our imperfections starts to change. Instead of attacking ourselves for every mistake, we begin asking simple questions like, why did this reaction happen? What can I learn from it? And how can I grow from this experience? This shift transforms mistakes from sources of shame into opportunities for understanding. In this way, imperfections stop being enemies and gradually become guides that help us grow wiser and more self-aware. 4. The present moment is where you meet yourself. One of the biggest reasons people keep running from themselves is because their mind is almost never in the present moment. Most of the time, the mind is either trapped in the past or lost in the future. It replays old conversations, regrets past mistakes, or imagines how things could have been different. At other times, it jumps ahead, worrying about problems that have not even happened yet. Because of this constant movement between past and future, people rarely experience the one moment where life is actually happening, the present moment. Buddhist teachings explain that true self-understanding can only happen in the present. The past already happened, and the future has not arrived yet, but the present moment is where your thoughts, emotions, and awareness exist right now. When you slow down and begin paying attention to this moment, you start noticing things about your mind that were always there, but hidden by constant distraction. For example, imagine sitting quietly for a few minutes with no phone, no music, and no conversation. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. Your mind might start producing many thoughts all at once. You may remember things you forgot, feel emotions you were avoiding, or notice worries that were hidden under daily busyness. This is the moment where many people feel the urge to escape again. They reach for their phone, turn on a video, or distract themselves in some way because sitting with their own mind feels unfamiliar. But Buddhist meditation teaches that this moment of awareness is not something to avoid. It is actually the doorway to understanding yourself. When you stay present and observe your breathing, your thoughts, and your emotions without judging them, you begin seeing how the mind truly works. You notice that thoughts appear and disappear naturally. You see that emotions rise and fall like waves in the ocean. Nothing stays permanent inside the mind. This understanding begins to change the relationship you have with your own thoughts. Instead of believing every thought or reacting to every emotion, you begin observing them calmly. You realize that you are not your thoughts and you are not your temporary emotions. They are simply experiences passing through your awareness. The more you practice staying present, the more comfortable you become with your own inner world. Silence stops feeling uncomfortable, and stillness begins to feel peaceful. Instead of running from yourself, you start learning how to sit peacefully with your own mind. In this way, the present moment becomes a place of discovery. It is the place where you meet yourself without distraction, without masks, and without the noise of the outside world. And when you truly learn to live in the present moment, the habit of running from yourself slowly disappears, because you finally realize that your mind is not something to fear, it is something to understand. 5. Compassion toward yourself is a form of strength. Many people believe that the only way to improve themselves is by being extremely hard on themselves. They criticize every mistake, judge every weakness, and constantly remind themselves of what they are doing wrong. The inner voice becomes harsh and demanding, telling them they should be better, stronger, smarter, or more successful. At first, this may seem like discipline, but over time this constant self-criticism slowly drains the mind. Instead of feeling motivated, a person begins to feel exhausted, discouraged, and disconnected from themselves. Buddhist teachings explain that the mind grows much better through understanding and compassion than through constant punishment. Compassion toward yourself means recognizing that being human naturally includes mistakes, confusion, and moments of weakness. Every person struggles with fear, doubt, and uncertainty at different times in their life. These experiences are not signs of failure, they are part of the process of learning and growing. Many people easily show kindness to others, but forget to show that same kindness to themselves. If a close friend made a mistake or was going through a difficult time, you would probably speak to them with patience and understanding. You would remind them that they are learning and that one moment does not define their entire life. But when it comes to their own mistakes, people often respond with harsh judgment instead of the same understanding they would offer someone else. This is where self-compassion becomes powerful. Instead of attacking yourself for every mistake, you begin observing your experiences with patience. When something goes wrong, instead of saying, "I am not good enough," you begin asking more helpful questions like, "What can I learn from this?" Or, "How can this experience help me grow stronger?" This shift in perspective changes the emotional environment inside the mind. When the mind feels safe rather than constantly attacked, it becomes more open to change. Growth happens more naturally because the mind is no longer paralyzed by fear of failure. Compassion does not mean ignoring mistakes or avoiding responsibility. It simply means treating yourself with the same fairness and patience that you would offer someone you truly care about. Buddhist wisdom also reminds us that compassion is not weakness. In fact, it is a sign of deep inner strength. It takes courage to face your own struggles without hiding from them, and it takes wisdom to understand that harsh judgment rarely creates lasting change. Compassion allows the mind to remain calm, balanced, and focused even when things are difficult. When you begin practicing compassion toward yourself, something important begins to shift. The relationship you have with your own mind becomes healthier. Instead of constantly fighting yourself, you begin supporting yourself. Instead of feeling ashamed of your humanity, you begin understanding it. And as this compassion grows, the path of self-acceptance becomes much easier to walk, because you realize that you do not need to be perfect in order to grow. You simply need the patience to keep learning and the kindness to keep moving forward. 6. Freedom begins when you stop comparing yourself. One of the quiet habits that causes deep dissatisfaction in the human mind is comparison. Many people are not unhappy because their lives are truly empty or meaningless. They become unhappy because they constantly measure their lives against the lives of others. Without realizing it, the mind begins turning life into a silent competition. Instead of simply living and growing, people begin watching everyone around them and asking the same question again and again: am I doing better or worse than them? This habit often begins very early in life. From childhood, people are compared with others in school, in abilities, in appearance, and in achievements. Someone may hear things like, "Look how well that person is doing," or "Why can't you be more like them?" Over time, the mind slowly learns to judge its own worth based on how it stands next to someone else. Instead of discovering its own path, it becomes focused on measuring distance from other people. As life continues, this comparison becomes even stronger. People compare their careers, their income, their relationships, their lifestyle, and even their happiness. In the modern world, this habit has become much more intense because people constantly see images of other people's lives through social media and public success stories. The mind begins seeing only the highlight moments of others, while secretly comparing them to its own everyday struggles. Because of this, many people begin believing that they are somehow behind in life. Someone might feel that they should already be more successful, more confident, or more accomplished because they see someone else achieving something earlier. Another person may begin doubting their worth because they believe others appear happier, more attractive, or more respected. The mind starts creating an invisible ladder where everyone is placed at different levels, and it constantly worries about where it stands. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that comparison is one of the most deceptive habits of the mind. It creates suffering not because life is lacking, but because the mind refuses to see its own journey clearly. Every human life unfolds under completely different conditions. Each person grows up in different environments, faces different challenges, learns different lessons, and walks through different experiences that shape who they become. When the mind compares two lives, it ignores these differences. It reduces everything to a simple measurement that is rarely accurate. Someone may appear successful from the outside while quietly struggling with fears, loneliness, or pressure. Another person may move more slowly in life but develop deep wisdom and resilience along the way. The mind cannot see the full story of another person's life, yet it still judges itself against the small part it can see. This constant comparison slowly steals joy from the present moment. Instead of appreciating personal growth, the mind dismisses it because someone else seems further ahead. Instead of recognizing progress, it focuses on what is still missing. Even achievements lose their meaning because the mind immediately looks for someone who has achieved something greater. The Buddha taught that this habit traps the mind in endless dissatisfaction. As long as your sense of worth depends on being better than someone else, peace becomes impossible. There will always be someone richer, more talented, more successful, or more admired. The mind will never reach a final point where comparison stops. Freedom begins when you recognize this pattern and gently step away from it. Instead of measuring your life against someone else's path, you begin returning your attention to your own journey. You begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Why am I not where they are?" the mind begins asking, "What can I learn from where I am right now?" This shift may seem small, but it changes everything. The moment you stop comparing, your mind becomes lighter. You begin noticing the progress you have made instead of dismissing it. You begin recognizing your strengths, your lessons, and your personal growth without needing validation through comparison. Buddhist teachings often encourage people to walk their path with awareness rather than competition. Life is not a race where everyone must reach the same destination at the same time. Each person's path unfolds differently, and the value of a life cannot be measured by speed alone. When you stop comparing yourself to others, you also begin appreciating the uniqueness of your own experiences. Every difficulty you faced taught you something. Every challenge shaped your character in ways that cannot be copied from someone else's life. Your struggles, your growth, and your discoveries belong only to you. This understanding gradually replaces envy with curiosity. Instead of feeling threatened by other people's success, you can simply recognize it as part of their journey. Their path does not take anything away from yours. In fact, seeing others grow can become a source of inspiration rather than insecurity. Another important change begins happening when comparison fades. The mind becomes more present. Instead of constantly looking outward, you begin focusing on your own actions, your own habits, and your own development. You start asking what kind of person you want to become rather than how you compare to someone else. This mindset allows growth to become more natural and meaningful. You are no longer trying to prove your worth through competition. Instead, you are developing yourself through awareness and intention. Each step forward becomes valuable because it reflects your own progress rather than someone else's expectations. Buddhist philosophy reminds us that the goal of life is not to become better than others. The goal is to become wiser, more compassionate, and more aware of the nature of the mind. These qualities cannot be measured through comparison. They grow quietly through reflection, patience, and understanding. When comparison disappears, another powerful feeling appears in its place: contentment. Contentment does not mean giving up on growth or ambition. It simply means appreciating where you are while continuing to move forward. It allows the mind to experience peace in the present moment, rather than constantly chasing a future that seems just out of reach. You begin noticing simple things that comparison once hid from you: the progress you made over the years, the challenges you survived, the knowledge you gained through experience, the strength you developed through difficult moments. These things often go unnoticed when the mind is too busy measuring itself against others. Gradually, life begins feeling less like a competition and more like a journey of discovery. You stop rushing to prove your worth and start exploring your potential at your own pace. Your goals become more personal and meaningful rather than based on external expectations. In this way, the practice of letting go of comparison becomes a form of freedom. You are no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of measuring, judging, and doubting yourself. Instead, you move through life with a clearer mind and a stronger connection to your own path. And perhaps the most important realization appears quietly within this freedom. Your life was never meant to look like someone else's. Your experiences, your lessons, and your growth form a story that is uniquely yours. When you stop comparing and start embracing your own journey, you finally begin living the life that was always waiting for you. 7. The moment you accept yourself, life begins to change. Many people spend a large part of their lives believing that they must become someone else before they can finally feel at peace. They think that once they become more successful, more confident, more respected, or more perfect, then happiness will finally arrive. Until that moment comes, they keep running from who they currently are. They hide their weaknesses, criticize their flaws, and constantly chase a future version of themselves that seems more worthy of love and acceptance. Because of this belief, people often live in a quiet war with themselves. Every mistake becomes proof that they are not good enough. Every weakness becomes something to be ashamed of. Instead of seeing themselves as human beings who are learning and evolving, they see themselves as unfinished problems that must be fixed before they deserve peace. But Buddhist wisdom teaches a very different understanding of transformation. According to Buddhist philosophy, real change does not begin when you reject yourself. Real change begins the moment you stop fighting your own existence. The moment you accept yourself exactly as you are, something powerful begins to shift inside the mind. Self-acceptance does not mean believing that you are perfect or that you should never grow. It simply means acknowledging the reality of who you are right now without adding layers of hatred, shame, or resistance. It means looking at your life honestly and saying, "This is where I am today," without turning that statement into a judgment about your worth. Many people misunderstand this idea because they believe acceptance will make them lazy or unmotivated. They think that if they accept themselves, they will stop trying to improve their lives. But in truth, the opposite happens. When you accept yourself, you stop wasting enormous amounts of mental energy fighting your own identity. That energy becomes available for awareness, learning, and genuine growth. Imagine carrying a heavy bag everywhere you go. At first, you might not even notice how much effort it takes to carry it because you have become used to the weight. But the moment you finally put the bag down, you suddenly realize how much lighter your body feels. Self-rejection works in a similar way. People carry the weight of self-judgment for so long that they forget how much energy it consumes. When you begin practicing self-acceptance, that weight slowly begins to lift. The mind becomes quieter because it no longer needs to constantly attack itself. Instead of thinking, "Why am I like this?" or "I should not feel this way," the mind begins observing experiences with curiosity rather than judgment. For example, when you feel fear, instead of criticizing yourself for being weak, you begin asking what the fear is trying to tell you. When you make a mistake, instead of punishing yourself endlessly, You begin looking for the lesson hidden inside that experience. This simple shift changes the entire relationship you have with your own mind. The Buddha taught that suffering often comes from resisting reality. When we refuse to accept our present experience, the mind creates tension and conflict. But when we allow ourselves to see things clearly, without trying to push them away, wisdom begins to grow naturally. Acceptance also allows you to understand your past more clearly. Many people spend years regretting old decisions or wishing they had acted differently in certain moments of their life. They replay these memories again and again, believing that if they had been smarter or stronger, their life would be different now. But self-acceptance changes how you see the past. Instead of seeing past mistakes as proof of failure, you begin seeing them as steps in the process of becoming who you are today. Every experience, even the painful ones, contributed to the knowledge and awareness you now carry. The past stops being a source of shame and becomes a source of learning. This perspective also helps you understand that growth is not something that happens instantly. Just as a tree grows slowly through seasons of change, human beings also grow through gradual learning and experience. Expecting perfection from yourself only creates frustration, but accepting your humanity allows patience to develop. Another important transformation happens when self-acceptance becomes stronger. You begin depending less on external approval. When people constantly reject themselves internally, they often search for validation from others to fill that emptiness. They want praise, recognition, or reassurance because it temporarily silences the voice of self-doubt. But when you begin accepting yourself, this dependency slowly fades. You no longer need constant approval to feel secure in your own identity. You can listen to feedback and learn from others without letting their opinions define your worth. Your sense of value becomes rooted in self-understanding rather than external praise. This inner stability brings a quiet form of confidence. It is not the loud confidence that tries to impress everyone. Instead, it is a calm awareness that you are continuously learning and growing. You stop pretending to be perfect, and because of that honesty, you become more authentic. Self-acceptance also changes how you interact with other people. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you become more compassionate toward others as well. You begin understanding that everyone is struggling with their own fears, doubts, and imperfections. Instead of judging others harshly, you become more patient and understanding. In this way, accepting yourself becomes the foundation for accepting life itself. You realize that imperfection is not something unique to you. It is part of the human experience. Everyone is learning, evolving, and making mistakes along the way. Gradually, the energy that was once used to fight yourself begins flowing in a different direction. Instead of resisting your life, you begin participating in it more fully. You become more present, more aware, and more engaged with the world around you. Small moments start feeling more meaningful because your mind is no longer distracted by constant self-criticism. You appreciate simple progress instead of ignoring it. You recognize that growth happens step by step, and each step matters. The moment you truly accept yourself, life begins to change, not because your circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because your relationship with yourself transforms. You begin living with greater clarity and peace. Challenges still exist, but they no longer feel like proof that something is wrong with you. Instead, challenges become opportunities to learn more about your mind, your resilience, and your potential. Buddhist teachings often remind us that liberation begins with understanding the mind. When you stop rejecting who you are and begin observing yourself with awareness and compassion, you move closer to that understanding. The person you were trying to escape gradually becomes the person you learn to respect and support. Instead of running away, you begin walking alongside yourself with patience. And in that moment, something quiet yet powerful happens. You realize that the life you were searching for was never waiting somewhere in the future. It begins right here, in the moment you finally stop running from who you are and start embracing the journey of becoming who you are meant to be. 8. The courage to face yourself changes everything. One of the greatest transformations a person can experience begins with a simple but powerful decision: the decision to finally face themselves honestly. For many people, this sounds easy in theory, but in reality, it is one of the most difficult things a human being can do. Throughout life, the mind develops countless ways to avoid looking deeply at itself. It distracts itself with constant activity, endless entertainment, or the approval of others. It stays busy so that it never has to sit quietly with its own thoughts. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us that true freedom cannot be found through distraction. As long as a person keeps running from their inner world, the same fears, insecurities, and patterns will continue repeating. Life may change on the outside, but the mind will carry the same struggles wherever it goes. Facing yourself means something deeper than simply thinking about your life. It means having the courage to observe your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors honestly, without immediately trying to justify them or hide from them. It means becoming aware of the habits of your mind, the patterns of your reactions, and the beliefs that quietly shape how you see the world. At first, this process can feel uncomfortable. When people begin paying attention to their thoughts, they often notice how restless the mind actually is. Thoughts jump from one worry to another. Old memories appear unexpectedly. Emotions that were hidden beneath daily busyness suddenly rise to the surface. Many people are surprised by how noisy the mind can be when they finally slow down enough to observe it. Because of this discomfort, people often return quickly to distraction. They check their phone, turn on music, start a conversation, or find something else to occupy their attention. The mind feels safer when it is constantly busy because silence reveals things that were previously ignored. But Buddhist practice teaches that silence is not something to fear. In fact, silence is one of the most powerful tools for understanding yourself. When you sit quietly and allow your mind to reveal itself without judgment, you begin seeing patterns that were invisible before. You begin noticing how certain thoughts repeat themselves, how certain emotions trigger specific reactions, and how certain beliefs influence your decisions. This awareness is the beginning of real transformation. Before you can change the mind, you must first understand it. If you never observe your habits, you will continue repeating them automatically. But when awareness enters the process, those habits become visible. And once something becomes visible, it can gradually be changed. Facing yourself also means acknowledging the parts of your personality that you may have tried to hide. Everyone has moments of jealousy, anger, fear, or insecurity. These emotions do not make someone a bad person. They simply reveal areas where the mind is still learning and growing. Many people try to deny these emotions because they believe acknowledging them means accepting weakness. But Buddhist wisdom teaches the opposite. True strength comes from awareness, not denial. When you recognize your emotional patterns clearly, you gain the ability to work with them rather than being controlled by them. For example, someone who understands their own anger can begin learning how to respond more calmly in difficult situations. Someone who recognizes their fear can begin understanding what lies beneath that fear. Someone who observes their insecurities can slowly develop confidence through self-awareness rather than pretending those insecurities do not exist. Facing yourself also changes the way you see your life experiences. Instead of blaming circumstances or other people for every difficulty, you begin asking deeper questions. You begin noticing how your own reactions shape the situations you experience. This does not mean blaming yourself for everything, but it means recognizing that the mind plays a powerful role in how life unfolds. When this awareness develops, Responsibility becomes empowering rather than overwhelming. Instead of feeling like life is something that constantly happens to you, you begin seeing how your choices, habits, and perspectives influence your path. Another powerful change begins happening when you stop running from yourself. The fear of being alone with your own mind slowly begins to disappear. Many people are uncomfortable with solitude because they associate silence with loneliness or boredom. But once you become familiar with your own thoughts and emotions, solitude begins to feel very different. Instead of feeling empty, it begins to feel peaceful. Instead of feeling isolating, it becomes an opportunity for reflection and clarity. Time alone becomes a space where the mind can reset, understand itself, and regain balance. This inner stability also strengthens your ability to face life's challenges. When you are comfortable with your own mind, external difficulties no longer feel as overwhelming. You have already learned how to observe fear, uncertainty, and stress without immediately being controlled by them. Buddhist teachings often describe the mind as something that can either be your greatest enemy or your greatest ally. When the mind is uncontrolled and constantly reacting, it creates confusion and suffering. But when the mind becomes aware of itself, it develops wisdom and calmness. Facing yourself is the moment when this transformation begins. It is the moment when you stop allowing unconscious habits to control your life and start observing them with clarity. Over time, this awareness gradually reshapes the way you think, feel, and act. You begin making decisions with greater understanding. You become less reactive and more thoughtful. Your emotions still arise, but they no longer dominate your actions in the same way. Perhaps most importantly, you develop a deeper relationship with yourself. Instead of seeing your mind as something chaotic or overwhelming, you begin seeing it as something that can be understood and guided. Life begins to feel less like a constant struggle and more like a process of discovery. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to learn more about your mind. Each experience becomes part of the journey of understanding yourself more deeply. In this way, the courage to face yourself quietly transforms every part of your life. It strengthens your awareness, deepens your understanding, and brings a sense of peace that cannot be found through external achievements alone. The moment you stop running from yourself and begin observing your mind with honesty is the moment everything begins to change. Because when you truly understand yourself, you no longer need to escape from who you are. Instead, you begin growing into the person you were always capable of becoming. 9. When you stop running, you finally discover who you are. For a large part of life, many people are unknowingly running from themselves. They are not always aware of it because the mind has many subtle ways of avoiding its own inner world. Some people run by staying constantly busy, filling every moment with work, entertainment, or social interaction. Others run by chasing achievements, believing that success will eventually silence their inner doubts. Some run by seeking approval from others, hoping that recognition will finally make them feel worthy. Yet behind all these behaviors, there is often the same quiet pattern. The mind is trying to escape something inside itself. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the root of much human suffering is this constant attempt to avoid the truth of our own mind. Instead of looking inward with patience and curiosity, many people spend their lives searching outside for something that will complete them. They believe that peace is somewhere in the future, waiting to appear once they become a different version of themselves. But the deeper truth is that the person they are trying to escape is also the person they must understand. The moment you stop running from yourself is the moment a completely new journey begins. Instead of searching for answers outside, you begin turning your attention inward. At first, this shift may feel unfamiliar because the mind has spent so much time looking outward. When attention finally turns inward, many people begin noticing how busy and restless their mind actually is. Thoughts appear one after another, jumping between memories, worries, plans, and emotions. The mind may replay conversations from the past or imagine situations that have not even happened yet. This constant movement can feel overwhelming at first, which is why many people quickly return to distraction. They reach for their phone, turn on music, or start doing something simply to avoid sitting with their own thoughts. But Buddhist practice teaches that this moment of awareness is not something to fear. It is actually the beginning of understanding. The mind has always been active in this way, but distraction prevented you from seeing it clearly. When you stop running and allow yourself to observe your thoughts calmly, something remarkable begins to happen. You begin realizing that thoughts are not permanent truths. They are simply mental events that appear and disappear within awareness. Some thoughts are useful and wise, while others are based on fear, habit, or misunderstanding. When you observe them carefully, you start seeing how many of them repeat the same patterns again and again. For example, the mind may constantly repeat beliefs such as, "I am not good enough," "I will never succeed," or "others are better than me." These thoughts may have been repeated for so long that they started feeling like facts. But when you observe them with awareness, you begin noticing that they are simply conditioned patterns of thinking rather than absolute truths. This realization creates a powerful shift. Instead of believing every thought automatically, you begin examining them more carefully. You begin asking whether these thoughts are actually helpful or whether they are simply habits of the mind that developed over time. At the same time, you also begin noticing your emotional patterns more clearly. Certain situations may trigger anger, fear, or insecurity almost instantly. Before awareness develops, these emotions often control your reactions without you realizing it. But once you start observing them, you create space between the emotion and your response. This space is extremely important because it allows wisdom to enter the situation. Instead of reacting automatically, you begin responding more consciously. You become less controlled by your emotions and more capable of guiding your actions with clarity. As this awareness grows, another important discovery appears. You begin realizing that your identity is not as fixed as you once believed. For most of life, people carry labels about themselves. "I am shy," "I am not confident," "I always fail," or "I am this type of person." These labels can quietly shape how someone sees their entire life. But when you observe your mind carefully, you begin noticing that these identities are also patterns of thought rather than permanent truths. Your personality, your reactions, and even your beliefs have been shaped by past experiences, habits, and circumstances. They are not unchangeable parts of who you are. This understanding brings a sense of freedom because it means that growth is always possible. If the mind created certain patterns through repetition, it can also create new patterns through awareness and practice. You are not trapped inside a fixed identity. You are a living process that continues evolving through understanding. Another powerful change happens when you stop running from yourself. The relationship you have with your own life begins to deepen. Instead of rushing through experiences while constantly thinking about the next goal, you begin paying more attention to the present moment. Simple things that were previously ignored begin to feel more meaningful. A quiet moment in nature, a calm conversation, or even the simple act of breathing becomes something you notice more clearly. Life stops feeling like a race towards some distant destination and begins feeling like a journey that is unfolding right now. This shift also reduces the pressure you once placed on yourself. When people are constantly running from who they are, they often feel that they must prove their worth through achievement or recognition. They believe they must constantly become more in order to feel enough. But when you begin understanding yourself more deeply, that pressure slowly fades. You realize that your value does not come from constantly proving something to the world. Your value comes from the simple fact that you are alive and capable of learning, growing, and contributing to life in your own way. This does not mean ambition disappears. You can still work toward meaningful goals and improve your life. The difference is that these goals are no longer driven by fear or self-rejection. Instead, they come from a place of curiosity and growth. When ambition grows from self-understanding rather than self-criticism, the journey becomes much healthier. You are no longer chasing success in order to escape yourself. Instead, you are developing your potential because you genuinely want to grow. As this transformation continues, another beautiful realization appears. You begin seeing that the person you were trying to escape was never your enemy. Your fears, insecurities, and doubts were simply parts of your mind asking for understanding. By running away from them, you kept the conflict alive. But by facing them with patience and awareness, you begin dissolving the struggle that once existed inside you. Life does not suddenly become perfect when this happens. Challenges still appear, and difficult emotions still arise from time to time. But the difference is that you are no longer afraid of your own mind. You know how to observe your thoughts, understand your emotions, and respond with greater clarity. This inner stability becomes one of the most valuable qualities a person can develop. It allows you to move through life with greater calmness and confidence because you are no longer trying to escape yourself. Buddhist teachings often remind us that true freedom does not come from controlling the outside world. It comes from understanding the nature of the mind. When the mind becomes clear and aware, many of the struggles that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their power. And this clarity begins with a simple but courageous step: the decision to stop running. When you stop running from yourself, you begin discovering who you truly are beneath all the fears, expectations, and habits that once shaped your identity. You discover a deeper awareness that has always been present inside you. From that awareness, wisdom begins to grow, peace becomes more natural, and life slowly transforms from a constant struggle into a journey of understanding. Because the truth is that the person you were searching for your entire life was never somewhere else. That person has always been within you, waiting patiently for the moment you finally stop running and begin looking within. 10. The peace you were searching for was always within you. Many people spend their entire lives searching for peace as if it is something that exists somewhere far away. They believe that peace will arrive when their life becomes more successful, when their problems disappear, when their relationships become perfect, or when they finally reach a future moment where everything feels stable. Because of this belief, they spend years chasing external solutions for an internal restlessness they cannot fully explain. This search often becomes exhausting because the moment one problem disappears, another one appears. A person may finally reach a goal they worked toward for years, only to discover that the peace they expected to feel lasts only for a short time. Soon the mind begins searching again for the next achievement, the next improvement, or the next moment where life might finally feel complete. Buddhist wisdom explains that this cycle happens because people are searching for peace in the wrong direction. They are looking for something outside themselves when the source of peace has always existed within their own mind. The problem is not that peace is absent. The problem is that the mind is so busy running, chasing, worrying, and comparing that it never slows down long enough to notice the peace that already exists. For most of life, the mind behaves like a restless traveler that never stops moving. It jumps from one thought to another, from one worry to the next plan, from one regret to the next expectation. Even when nothing is actually wrong in the present moment, the mind continues searching for something to fix, something to change, or something to fear. Because of this constant movement, people rarely experience the quiet space that exists beneath their thoughts. Buddhist teachings describe this clearly. The mind itself is not the problem. The problem is the endless activity of the mind that prevents us from seeing its deeper nature. Imagine a lake on a windy day. The surface of the water is constantly moving, creating waves that distort everything reflected in it. But beneath those waves, the water itself remains calm and still. In the same way, the human mind often appears chaotic on the surface because of constant thinking. But beneath those thoughts, there is a natural stillness that has always been present. Most people never discover this stillness because they never stop running long enough to notice it. They keep themselves busy with distractions, constantly feeding the mind with information, entertainment, and noise. Silence becomes unfamiliar and even uncomfortable because the mind has forgotten how to rest. But when you begin practicing awareness and self-acceptance, something slowly begins to change. The mind starts becoming quieter, not because thoughts disappear completely, but because you stop being controlled by them. You begin observing your thoughts rather than chasing every one of them. This shift creates moments of stillness that may feel small at first. Perhaps it happens when you pause and notice your breathing. Perhaps it appears during a quiet walk or a moment of reflection when you are not focused on solving problems or planning the future. During these moments, something subtle becomes clear. You begin realizing that peace is not something you must create. It is something that appears naturally when the mind stops struggling. The Buddha often taught that much of human suffering comes from attachment and resistance. The mind clings to pleasant experiences and resists unpleasant ones, constantly trying to control the flow of life. But life itself is always changing. Experiences arise and pass away continuously, and when the mind tries to hold on to them, it creates tension. Peace begins appearing when this tension starts to dissolve. Instead of constantly trying to control everything, you begin allowing life to unfold while responding to it with awareness. You still care about your goals, your responsibilities, and your relationships, but you are no longer fighting every moment that does not match your expectations. This acceptance brings a deep sense of relief. The mind no longer feels like it must constantly defend itself against life. Instead, it begins flowing with life more naturally. Another important discovery appears as this awareness grows. You begin noticing that many of the things that once disturbed your peace were actually created by the mind itself. Thoughts about what others think of you, worries about the future, or regrets about the past often create emotional storms that feel very real. But when you observe these thoughts carefully, you realize that they are simply mental stories rather than immediate reality. For example, the mind might imagine a future problem that has not happened yet and begin feeling anxious about it. But in the present moment, nothing is actually wrong. The anxiety exists because the mind is living in a future that does not exist yet. The same thing happens with the past. The mind may replay old mistakes repeatedly, creating feelings of guilt or regret. Yet the past itself is already gone. The suffering continues because the mind keeps returning to it. When awareness becomes stronger, you begin recognizing these patterns more clearly. You begin seeing how the mind creates unnecessary suffering by constantly leaving the present moment. And when you gently return your attention to what is happening right now, many of those worries lose their power. This does not mean life becomes free of challenges. Difficult situations will still appear, and painful emotions will still arise from time to time. But the difference is that you no longer add unnecessary layers of mental struggle on top of those experiences. Instead of resisting every difficulty, you begin approaching life with a calmer and more balanced mind. You learn that peace does not require a perfect life. It requires a mind that understands how to remain steady even when circumstances change. Another transformation also occurs when you discover that peace exists within you. You begin relying less on external conditions for your sense of well-being. When happiness depends entirely on success, recognition, or approval, it becomes fragile because those things can always change. But when peace is rooted in awareness and understanding, it becomes much more stable. You can still enjoy achievements and positive experiences, but your inner balance does not collapse when things become difficult. This stability creates a quiet confidence that cannot easily be shaken. You begin trusting your ability to face life rather than fearing every challenge that appears. Buddhist teachings often describe this as discovering your true nature. Beneath the layers of fear, insecurity, and mental noise, there is an awareness that is naturally calm and clear. It has always been present, even during the most stressful moments of your life. The problem was never that peace was missing. The problem was that the mind was too busy searching for it somewhere else. When you stop running from yourself and begin observing your mind with patience, you slowly rediscover this natural stillness. It does not appear suddenly like a dramatic event. Instead, it grows gradually through awareness, understanding, and acceptance. Moments of calm become more frequent, your reactions become more balanced, your perspective on life becomes wider and more compassionate, and eventually you realize something that changes the way you see everything. The peace you were searching for was never waiting in the future. It was never hidden inside success, recognition, or perfection. It was quietly present within you all along, waiting for the moment when you finally stopped running long enough to notice it. 11. When you make peace with yourself, the world feels different. There comes a quiet moment in the journey of self-understanding when something inside you begins to soften. It does not happen with fireworks or sudden dramatic change. Instead, it unfolds slowly, almost gently, like the first light of morning appearing before the sun fully rises. This moment arrives when a person finally begins making peace with themselves. After years of inner conflict, self-criticism, and running from uncomfortable parts of the mind, the struggle gradually begins to fade. And when that happens, the way you experience the world starts to change in ways you may never have expected. For most of life, many people unknowingly carry an invisible tension inside their mind. They constantly judge themselves, question their worth, or feel that they must become someone better before they can finally relax. Because of this inner pressure, life often feels like something that must be constantly managed and controlled. Every mistake feels heavier than it should. Every criticism feels more painful, and every challenge appears like proof that something is wrong. But when you begin making peace with yourself, that tension slowly dissolves. Instead of constantly fighting your own thoughts and emotions, you start allowing them to exist without immediately turning them into problems. You recognize that the mind naturally produces many different experiences: joy, sadness, fear, excitement, confidence, and uncertainty. None of these emotions define your entire identity. They are simply part of the human experience moving through you. This realization changes how you respond to yourself during difficult moments. When you feel anxious or uncertain, you no longer treat those feelings as enemies that must be eliminated immediately. Instead, you observe them with patience. You acknowledge their presence, understand their message, and allow them to pass without letting them control your entire state of mind. The Buddha often taught that much of human suffering comes from resistance. The mind constantly tries to push away unpleasant experiences and hold tightly onto pleasant ones. But life does not follow our preferences. Emotions rise and fall naturally, and when we resist them, the struggle only becomes stronger. Making peace with yourself means learning to stop this constant resistance. It means allowing your mind to experience emotions without immediately judging them or trying to escape them. When sadness appears, you allow yourself to feel it without turning it into self-blame. When fear arises, you acknowledge it without letting it define your future. As this acceptance grows stronger, something remarkable begins to happen. The inner noise that once dominated your thoughts becomes quieter. The constant voice that judged every action begins losing its power. Instead of hearing criticism all the time, you begin hearing a calmer and more understanding perspective within your mind. This new relationship with yourself creates a sense of emotional stability. Problems that once felt overwhelming now appear more manageable because your mind is no longer adding unnecessary pressure to them. Instead of reacting impulsively to every situation, you develop the ability to pause, observe, and respond more thoughtfully. Because of this inner change, the way you see the world also begins to shift. When someone criticizes you, it no longer feels like a personal attack on your entire identity. You can listen, evaluate whether the criticism contains useful insight, and then move forward without carrying unnecessary resentment. When life becomes difficult, you no longer feel completely lost or defeated. You understand that challenges are part of the human experience and that your ability to face them does not depend on being perfect. You begin trusting your resilience rather than doubting your worth. Another beautiful transformation occurs in your relationships with other people. When you are constantly judging yourself, it becomes easy to judge others in the same way. The mind often projects its own insecurities outward, expecting others to meet impossible standards. But when you begin making peace with yourself, you naturally become more compassionate toward others as well. You recognize that everyone is carrying their own struggles, fears, and uncertainties. Instead of seeing people as competitors or threats, you begin seeing them as fellow travelers on the same human journey. This understanding creates deeper and more meaningful connections. Conversations become more genuine because you are no longer trying to prove yourself. You listen more carefully because your mind is not busy defending its identity. You respond with patience because you understand that growth takes time for everyone. Even your relationship with failure begins to change. Before self-acceptance, failure often feels like a confirmation of personal inadequacy. The mind interprets mistakes as evidence that something is fundamentally wrong. But once you make peace with yourself, failure becomes something different. It becomes information. It becomes a teacher. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" you begin asking, "What can I learn from this experience?" This shift removes the fear that once prevented you from taking risks or trying new things. You become more willing to grow because you no longer see mistakes as attacks on your identity. Life also begins to feel more present. When the mind is constantly fighting itself, it spends much of its energy trapped in the past or worried about the future. But when that inner conflict fades, attention naturally returns to the present moment. You begin noticing simple experiences more clearly. A quiet moment of reflection, the sound of wind moving through trees, the warmth of sunlight, or the comfort of meaningful conversation starts feeling more vivid. These moments were always there, but the noise of self-judgment prevented you from fully experiencing them. This growing awareness brings a sense of gratitude that was difficult to feel before. Instead of constantly focusing on what is missing from your life, you begin appreciating what already exists. Gratitude becomes less about forcing positive thoughts and more about naturally recognizing the value of the present moment. Another powerful realization begins emerging as this peace deepens. You begin understanding that your worth was never dependent on becoming someone else. The version of yourself you once rejected was simply a person in the process of learning and evolving. The mistakes you made, the fears you experienced, and the doubts you carried were not signs of failure. They were part of the journey that led you to greater awareness. Without those experiences, the wisdom you now carry would not exist. This realization allows you to look at your past with more compassion. Instead of seeing earlier versions of yourself with embarrassment or regret, you begin seeing them with understanding. That person was doing the best they could with the awareness they had at the time. And now, with greater understanding, you continue moving forward. The world itself has not changed during this process. Challenges still exist, people still behave in unpredictable ways, and life continues bringing moments of uncertainty. But your experience of the world feels different because your relationship with yourself has transformed. You are no longer fighting an invisible battle inside your own mind. You are no longer running from parts of yourself that once felt uncomfortable. Instead, you walk through life with a quieter mind, a more balanced perspective, and a deeper sense of inner stability. And perhaps the most important change is this. You realize that peace was never something you needed to earn through perfection. It was something that naturally appeared the moment you stopped rejecting who you are. When you make peace with yourself, the world does not become perfect, but it becomes easier to live in, because the place that once felt like a battlefield, your own mind, has finally become a place of understanding. 12. Your true self was never lost, it was only covered. There is a quiet misunderstanding that many people carry throughout their lives. They believe that somewhere along the way they lost themselves. They say things like, "I don't know who I am anymore," or "I need to find myself." These words are spoken by people from all walks of life, from those who feel overwhelmed by responsibilities to those who feel empty despite success. The feeling behind these words is often the same, a deep sense that the person they truly are has somehow disappeared. But Buddhist wisdom offers a very different perspective on this experience. According to these teachings, your true self was never actually lost. It was never destroyed or removed from you. Instead, it became covered by layers of habits, fears, expectations, and beliefs that slowly formed over time. Much like the sky becomes hidden behind thick clouds, your natural clarity can become hidden behind the constant activity of the mind. From early childhood, the mind begins collecting ideas about who you should be. Family expectations, cultural standards, school experiences, and social comparisons slowly build an image of the ideal version of yourself. You may be told to behave a certain way, achieve certain goals, or live according to specific standards. While some of these influences can guide growth, they can also create pressure that slowly separates you from your natural way of being. Over time, the mind begins identifying with these expectations. You start believing that your worth depends on meeting them. If you succeed, you feel temporarily validated. If you fail, you feel that something is wrong with you. Gradually, the mind becomes so focused on maintaining this image that it forgets how to simply exist without constant judgment. This is how the feeling of being lost begins. It is not that your true self disappeared. It is that your awareness became so focused on external identities that you stopped noticing the deeper part of yourself that was always present. Buddhist teachings often describe this deeper nature as awareness itself. Beneath your thoughts, beneath your emotions, beneath the stories you tell about your identity, there is a quiet awareness that observes everything. This awareness is the part of you that notices your thoughts, recognizes your emotions, and experiences life directly. For most people, this awareness is hidden beneath constant mental noise. Thoughts about the past, worries about the future, comparisons with others, and judgments about yourself create a continuous stream of activity that fills the mind. Because of this, it becomes difficult to recognize the calm presence that exists beneath these thoughts. But the moment you begin slowing down and observing your mind, the layers start becoming visible. You begin noticing how certain beliefs repeat themselves again and again. You see how fear can shape decisions, how insecurity can influence behavior, and how the desire for approval can guide actions that do not truly reflect who you are. This observation is not meant to create self-criticism. Instead, it reveals something important. The layers covering your true self were created through experience, and because they were created, they can also be understood and gradually released. Imagine a mirror that has been covered with dust over many years. The mirror itself never lost its ability to reflect clearly. It only appeared unclear because the surface was covered. When the dust is gently wiped away, the mirror begins reflecting again without needing to become something new. The same process happens within the mind. Your clarity does not need to be created from nothing. It simply needs space to reappear once the layers of distraction and self-rejection begin dissolving. This process often begins with awareness and self-acceptance. When you stop running from yourself and start observing your mind with curiosity, you begin identifying the patterns that once controlled you. You notice the beliefs that were shaped by past experiences and recognize that they are not permanent definitions of who you are. For example, someone who was criticized often in childhood may carry the belief that they are never good enough. That belief may influence decisions, relationships, and confidence for many years. But once the belief becomes visible, it begins losing its authority. You realize that it was a story created by past circumstances rather than a permanent truth about your identity. This awareness allows you to respond differently. Instead of automatically accepting every negative thought as fact, you begin examining whether it truly reflects reality. Some thoughts will fade when they are no longer reinforced, while others may reveal areas where growth and healing are needed. As this process continues, the mind gradually becomes clearer. The emotional reactions that once felt overwhelming begin losing their intensity because you understand where they come from. Habits that once felt automatic become easier to change because awareness has entered the process. With each layer that becomes visible and understood, you move closer to reconnecting with your natural state of awareness. This state is not something mystical or unreachable. It is the quiet sense of presence that appears when the mind is not trapped in constant judgment. It is the calm attention you experience when you fully observe a moment without trying to control it. It is the simple feeling of being alive and aware without needing to prove anything to anyone. When people reconnect with this state, they often describe feeling lighter, as if a burden they carried for years has finally been released. Life does not suddenly become free of challenges, but the way those challenges are experienced changes dramatically. Instead of reacting to everything with fear or self-doubt, the mind begins responding with greater clarity. Instead of constantly searching for approval, you begin trusting your own understanding. Instead of trying to become someone else, you begin growing naturally into the person you already are. Another beautiful change occurs in how you relate to your life story. Before self-understanding develops, people often see their past as something they must escape. They wish certain experiences had never happened, believing those events ruined their chances for happiness. But once awareness deepens, the past begins appearing in a different light. You begin seeing how every experience contributed to the wisdom you now carry. Difficult moments taught resilience. Mistakes revealed lessons that shaped maturity. Even painful experiences helped develop empathy and understanding for others. The story of your life stops feeling like something broken that needs to be fixed. Instead, it becomes a path of learning that gradually brought you closer to understanding yourself. And through this understanding, the feeling of being lost slowly disappears. You realize that the person you were searching for was never somewhere far away. Your true nature was never destroyed by mistakes, expectations, or struggles. It was simply hidden beneath layers that formed over time. Once those layers begin dissolving through awareness and acceptance, something deeply familiar begins to appear again. A quiet clarity, a calm presence, a sense of being comfortable within your own mind. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize self-understanding rather than self-rejection. You do not need to fight yourself in order to become whole. You only need the patience to observe your mind honestly and the compassion to accept your humanity. Because the truth is simple but powerful. Your true self was never lost. It was only waiting for the moment when you would finally slow down, look within, and recognize that it had been there all along. 13. The life you were waiting for begins the moment you stop escaping yourself. There is a quiet moment that eventually arrives in the life of someone who has spent years running from themselves. It is not dramatic, and it does not always come with a sudden realization. Instead, it begins with a simple shift in awareness. After years of chasing distractions, avoiding uncomfortable emotions, and trying to become someone else, the mind slowly begins to pause. And in that pause, a powerful truth begins to reveal itself. The life you were waiting for was never somewhere far away. It begins the moment you stop escaping yourself. Many people live with the belief that happiness is something that will arrive in the future. They think peace will come when their life becomes easier, when they achieve more success, or when they finally reach a version of themselves that feels good enough. Because of this belief, they spend years trying to fix themselves before allowing themselves to live fully. But this mindset creates an endless loop. Every time one goal is reached, another expectation appears. Every time one problem is solved, another concern takes its place. The mind keeps telling itself that real peace will come later, somewhere beyond the present moment. Buddhist wisdom gently challenges this belief. It teaches that the present moment is not simply a temporary waiting room for a better future. It is the only place where life is actually happening. If the mind is always running away from the present moment, it also runs away from life itself. This is why escaping yourself becomes such a powerful barrier to peace. When you reject parts of who you are, when you constantly criticize your own thoughts and emotions, the mind becomes a place of tension rather than understanding. Life begins to feel like something you must survive instead of something you can experience fully. But when you stop escaping yourself, the relationship with your life begins to transform. At first, stopping this escape may feel uncomfortable. The mind has spent so many years avoiding certain thoughts and emotions that facing them can feel unfamiliar. Old fears may appear, regrets from the past may surface. Questions about your identity and purpose may rise into awareness. Yet this moment of honesty is not a problem. It is the doorway to freedom. For the first time, you are allowing your mind to reveal itself without forcing it to hide behind distractions. Instead of pushing thoughts away, you observe them. Instead of judging emotions immediately, you listen to what they are trying to show you. Through this observation, something important becomes clear. Many of the things you were running from were not as dangerous as the mind imagined. Fear, insecurity, and doubt often feel overwhelming only when they remain hidden and unexplored. When you finally bring them into awareness, they begin losing their mysterious power. For example, someone might spend years avoiding the fear of failure. They avoid trying new things because they are afraid of making mistakes. But when they finally examine that fear closely, they may realize that failure itself is not the real problem. The real fear is the judgment that might follow, or the belief that failure defines their worth. Once this belief becomes visible, it can be questioned. Is failure truly proof that someone is incapable? Or is it simply part of the learning process that every human being experiences? This kind of reflection slowly weakens the patterns that once controlled the mind. Each time you face a thought or emotion with awareness instead of avoidance, the mind becomes a little more free. Another change begins happening when you stop escaping yourself. Your energy begins returning to the present moment. When people spend most of their time running from their inner world, they often feel exhausted without understanding why. The mind constantly uses energy to maintain distractions, suppress emotions, and protect fragile identities. But when you allow yourself to exist honestly, that wasted energy becomes available again. You feel more present in your daily life. Simple activities begin feeling more meaningful, because your attention is no longer divided between reality and avoidance. Even ordinary moments begin revealing a quiet richness. A peaceful walk, a deep conversation, or a few minutes of reflection can bring a sense of calm that was once hidden beneath mental noise. This is one of the most beautiful discoveries on the path of self-acceptance. You begin realizing that life was never as empty as it sometimes appeared. The problem was not that life lacked meaning, but that the mind was too distracted to experience it fully. When you stop escaping yourself, your perspective on time also begins changing. Many people feel that their life is always rushing forward. They worry about how much time they have wasted or how much time remains to achieve their goals. But when awareness deepens, time begins feeling different. Instead of constantly racing toward the future, you begin appreciating the present moment as something valuable in itself. Each moment becomes part of your life, rather than simply a step toward something else. This shift does not remove ambition or purpose. You can still pursue goals, build meaningful projects, and improve your life. The difference is that these pursuits no longer come from a place of self-rejection. Instead of chasing success to escape who you are, you pursue growth because you genuinely want to explore your potential. The motivation becomes healthier and more balanced. Another transformation occurs in how you view other people. When you are constantly escaping yourself, it becomes easy to compare your life with others. You may feel jealous of their achievements or insecure about your own progress. But once you stop escaping your inner world, these comparisons begin losing their importance. You become more focused on your own path, rather than measuring it against someone else's journey. You begin understanding that every person is navigating their own struggles, fears, and lessons. This understanding naturally increases compassion. Instead of judging others quickly, you recognize the shared humanity that connects everyone. Everyone is learning. Everyone is evolving. Everyone is trying to understand themselves and their place in the world. Perhaps the most powerful transformation appears quietly as this process continues. You begin realizing that you do not need to become someone else in order to live a meaningful life. For years, the mind may have believed that the future held a better version of you, someone more confident, more successful, or more perfect. But when you stop escaping yourself, you see that growth does not require rejecting who you are today. Growth begins exactly where you are. The person you are right now already carries the capacity for wisdom, compassion, and awareness. Those qualities may have been hidden beneath fear and distraction, but they were never destroyed. By facing yourself honestly, you begin uncovering those qualities step by step. Life then stops feeling like a distant destination you must reach someday. It becomes a journey that is unfolding right now. Each moment becomes an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply. Each challenge becomes a chance to develop patience and insight. Each experience becomes part of a story that is constantly evolving. And slowly, almost without noticing, you realize that the life you were waiting for has already begun. It began the moment you stopped running. It began the moment you turned inward with awareness instead of fear. It began the moment you allowed yourself to exist without constant judgment. Because the truth is simple and powerful. The life you were searching for was never hiding somewhere outside of you. It begins the moment you stop escaping yourself and start living fully as the person you already are. 14. The journey back to yourself is the greatest freedom. For many people, life feels like a long search. They search for happiness, for success, for recognition, for purpose, and for a sense of peace that always seems slightly out of reach. At different stages of life, this search takes different forms. Sometimes it appears as ambition, sometimes as the desire for approval, and sometimes as the quiet hope that one day everything will finally make sense. Yet beneath all these pursuits, there is often a deeper longing that people struggle to describe. It is the feeling that something essential is missing, even when life appears to be going well. Buddhist wisdom suggests that this feeling does not come from a lack of achievement or opportunity. Instead, it comes from a separation between a person and their own inner awareness. In other words, many people are not truly disconnected from happiness, meaning, or peace. They are disconnected from themselves. This disconnection does not happen suddenly. It develops slowly over time as the mind becomes absorbed in expectations, comparisons, fears, and identities. From childhood onward, people begin learning what they should become, what they should achieve, and how they should behave. While these expectations can provide guidance, they can also create pressure that gradually pulls attention away from the simple experience of being present. As years pass, the mind becomes filled with goals, responsibilities, worries, and judgments. People become busy maintaining an image of who they believe they should be. They work hard to meet standards, gain approval, and avoid failure. Without realizing it, they begin living according to external expectations rather than inner awareness. This is how the feeling of being lost gradually appears. The mind becomes so focused on becoming something that it forgets how to simply be. But the path of Buddhism gently invites us to rediscover something we may have forgotten. It teaches that the most important journey a person can take is not a journey toward becoming someone else. It is the journey back to themselves. This journey does not require traveling across the world or achieving extraordinary things. Instead, it begins with a quiet shift in attention. It begins when you start observing your own mind with honesty and curiosity. At first, this may feel unfamiliar because the mind is used to constantly looking outward. People spend so much time thinking about what others expect, what they must accomplish, or what they fear losing, that they rarely pause to observe what is happening inside. But the moment you begin looking inward with awareness, something begins to change. You start noticing the patterns of your thoughts. You see how certain beliefs repeat themselves again and again. You recognize how emotions rise and fall depending on circumstances. For example, you may notice that when someone criticizes you, the mind immediately reacts with defensiveness or self-doubt. When something goes wrong, the mind may quickly begin blaming itself or worrying about future consequences. These reactions may have felt automatic for years, but awareness allows you to see them clearly. This clarity is the beginning of freedom. Before awareness develops, the mind operates like a machine running on old programming. It repeats the same habits of thinking and reacting without questioning them. But once you begin observing these patterns, you create space between the thought and your response. In that space, wisdom has room to grow. You begin realizing that thoughts are not commands you must obey. They are simply mental events that appear and disappear. Some thoughts are useful, while others are based on fear or misunderstanding. When you stop automatically believing every thought that appears in your mind, the grip those thoughts once had begins to loosen. Another important discovery appears during this journey inward. You begin recognizing that your identity is not fixed or permanent. For most of life, people carry labels about themselves such as, "I am shy," "I am not confident," "I always fail," or "I am this kind of person." These labels may have formed through past experiences, but they often become limitations that shape how someone sees their future. When awareness grows, these labels begin losing their authority. You realize that personality traits and behaviors are not permanent definitions of who you are. They are patterns that developed through experience and repetition. This realization opens the door to change. If the mind learned certain patterns through repetition, it can also learn new patterns through awareness and practice. Confidence can grow where insecurity once existed. Patience can develop where frustration once dominated. Compassion can replace judgment. This transformation does not happen overnight, but it begins the moment awareness enters the process. As you continue this journey back to yourself, another powerful shift occurs. You begin letting go of the constant need to prove your worth. Many people spend years trying to demonstrate their value through achievements, recognition, or approval from others. They believe that once they accomplish enough, they will finally feel secure. But the search for external validation rarely provides lasting peace. Each achievement creates only temporary satisfaction before the mind begins chasing the next goal. When you reconnect with yourself through awareness, your sense of worth becomes less dependent on outside opinions. You still appreciate recognition and success, but they no longer define your entire identity. Instead, your sense of stability comes from understanding your own mind. This understanding allows you to move through life with greater calmness. When challenges appear, you respond with clarity rather than panic. When mistakes happen, you learn from them instead of turning them into proof of failure. Even relationships begin changing in a meaningful way. When people feel disconnected from themselves, they often seek others to fill that emptiness. They depend heavily on validation, approval, or constant attention. But when you become comfortable with your own awareness, relationships become healthier and more balanced. You connect with others not out of desperation, but out of genuine understanding and compassion. You begin listening more carefully because your mind is not busy defending its identity. You respond more patiently because you recognize that everyone is learning and growing at their own pace. Gradually, life begins feeling less like a struggle and more like a process of discovery. Instead of constantly trying to control everything, you begin allowing life to unfold while responding with awareness. Instead of fearing every uncertainty, you develop trust in your ability to face whatever arises. Perhaps the most beautiful realization of this journey appears quietly. You discover that the freedom you were searching for was never something the world needed to give you. It was something that existed within you all along. Freedom is not the absence of challenges. It is the ability to face life without being controlled by fear, doubt, or constant self-rejection. When you understand your mind, many of the chains that once held you begin dissolving naturally. You are no longer trapped by past mistakes or future worries. You are able to experience the present moment more fully. This does not mean you stop growing or improving your life. Instead, growth becomes a natural expression of awareness rather than a desperate attempt to become someone else. The journey back to yourself continues throughout life. There will always be new layers of understanding, new lessons, and new insights waiting to appear. But each step on this path brings greater clarity and peace. And eventually, you realize something deeply important. The freedom you were seeking was never waiting in success, recognition, or perfection. It was waiting within the quiet awareness that appears the moment you stop running from yourself and finally return home to your own mind. 15. The moment you truly accept yourself, your life begins to flow. For many people, life often feels like a constant struggle against something inside themselves. There is always a voice in the mind saying that they are not ready yet, not strong enough yet, not successful enough yet, or not worthy enough yet. Because of this voice, people delay their peace. They tell themselves that one day, after they fix their flaws, achieve their goals, and become a better version of themselves, then they will finally allow themselves to feel calm and complete. But this way of living quietly creates a never-ending race. The mind keeps moving the finish line further and further away. Just when one goal is achieved, another expectation appears. Just when one problem is solved, another fear begins to grow. The person keeps waiting for a future moment where everything will finally feel right, yet that moment rarely arrives. Buddhist wisdom offers a powerful insight about this pattern. It teaches that life begins to flow naturally, not when everything becomes perfect, but when the mind stops rejecting the present version of itself. The moment you truly accept who you are, without hiding from your weaknesses or exaggerating your strengths, something important begins to shift within your awareness. Self-acceptance is often misunderstood. Many people believe that accepting themselves means giving up on improvement. They worry that if they stop criticizing themselves, they will become lazy or careless. But true acceptance is not the same as complacency. It simply means recognizing reality without turning it into a battlefield. When you accept yourself, you acknowledge where you are in your journey. You recognize your abilities, your fears, your habits, and your dreams without pretending they are something else. Instead of constantly saying, "I should be different," you begin saying, "This is where I am, and I can grow from here." This simple shift removes a huge amount of pressure from the mind. Before acceptance, the mind spends enormous energy trying to escape its own imperfections. It hides certain emotions, denies certain experiences, and avoids situations that might reveal weakness. But once acceptance appears, the mind no longer needs to maintain this exhausting defense. You stop pretending, you stop hiding, you stop fighting yourself. And when that internal struggle begins to fade, your energy becomes available for something much more valuable: awareness. With this awareness, you start understanding your mind more clearly. You see the patterns of your behavior without immediately judging them. You notice how certain situations trigger fear, how certain thoughts repeat themselves, and how certain habits influence your decisions. Instead of attacking yourself for these patterns, you observe them with curiosity. This curiosity becomes the beginning of transformation. For example, imagine someone who struggles with insecurity. Before self-acceptance, they might constantly criticize themselves for not being confident enough. They may feel embarrassed about their fear and try to hide it from others. But hiding insecurity often makes it stronger because the mind keeps treating it as something shameful. Once acceptance enters the picture, the relationship with that insecurity changes. Instead of rejecting it, the person begins observing it. They start noticing when it appears, what situations trigger it, and what thoughts accompany it. Through this observation, they gradually understand the roots of their fear. And once something is understood clearly, it becomes easier to work with. Confidence then begins to grow naturally, not because the person forced themselves to be different, but because awareness gradually replaced misunderstanding. This is how life begins to flow. When you are constantly fighting yourself, everything feels heavy. Even simple decisions feel complicated because the mind is divided between different expectations. But when acceptance appears, the mind becomes more unified. You are no longer pushing yourself in opposite directions. Your actions begin aligning with your understanding. Your choices become clearer. Your energy becomes focused rather than scattered. This inner alignment creates a sense of flow in life. Flow does not mean that life suddenly becomes free of problems. Challenges will still appear, and unexpected events will still occur. But the difference is that you no longer add unnecessary resistance to those experiences. Before acceptance, every difficulty feels personal. A mistake becomes proof that something is wrong with you. A failure feels like a permanent label. A criticism feels like an attack on your identity. After acceptance, those same experiences appear differently. A mistake becomes information. A failure becomes a lesson. A criticism becomes an opportunity to reflect. Instead of feeling defeated by challenges, you begin learning from them. Your mind becomes more flexible and adaptable. This flexibility allows life to move more naturally. Another beautiful transformation happens in your relationship with time. Many people spend their lives either regretting the past or worrying about the future. They replay old events in their mind, wishing they had made different decisions. Or they imagine future scenarios, fearing what might go wrong. But when you accept yourself, the present moment becomes more comfortable. You no longer feel the need to constantly escape into memories or predictions. You begin experiencing life as it is happening right now. This presence creates a deeper appreciation for simple moments. You notice things that once passed unnoticed: the quiet beauty of nature, the warmth of sunlight, the comfort of meaningful conversations, the peaceful rhythm of breathing. Life begins to feel richer, not because circumstances change dramatically, but because your attention has returned to the present. Acceptance also changes the way you relate to other people. When someone is constantly rejecting parts of themselves, they often project that same judgment onto others. They expect perfection from people around them because they secretly expect perfection from themselves. But when you accept your own humanity, you begin recognizing the humanity in others as well. You understand that everyone is learning, growing, and struggling in their own way. This understanding creates compassion. Instead of comparing yourself constantly, you begin respecting the uniqueness of each person's journey. Instead of feeling threatened by others' success, you can appreciate it. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, you can respond with patience. Relationships become lighter and more genuine because you are no longer trying to prove your worth through them. Perhaps the most powerful realization appears slowly through this process. You begin understanding that your value was never dependent on becoming someone else. For years, the mind may have believed that happiness required reaching a perfect version of yourself. But through awareness and acceptance, you realize that growth does not require self-rejection. Growth begins from understanding. The person you are today already carries the potential for wisdom, compassion, creativity, and resilience. Those qualities may have been hidden beneath fear or doubt, but they were never destroyed. By accepting yourself honestly, you create the space for those qualities to emerge. Life then begins moving with a different rhythm. You stop forcing everything to happen immediately. You stop measuring your worth by unrealistic standards. You begin trusting the natural process of growth. Just like a tree does not rush its own growth, your life begins unfolding at its own pace. Each experience contributes to your understanding. Each challenge strengthens your awareness. And gradually, you begin noticing that life feels less like a battle and more like a journey. A journey where you are no longer fighting yourself at every step. A journey where you can move forward with curiosity instead of fear. A journey where peace is no longer postponed until some distant future. The moment you truly accept yourself, life begins to flow, because the biggest obstacle you once faced, your resistance to yourself, has finally been released. And in that moment, something quietly becomes clear. You were never broken. You were never missing something essential. You were simply learning how to return to yourself. And the moment you stop rejecting who you are, life finally begins moving the way it was always meant to, naturally, calmly, and with a quiet sense of freedom that comes from living in harmony with your own mind. 16. The freedom of being completely yourself. For a long time, many people move through life feeling as if they must constantly adjust themselves in order to belong. They carefully watch how others behave, what others expect, and what society considers acceptable or admirable. Slowly, almost without noticing, they begin shaping their personality around these expectations. They learn to say certain things, hide certain emotions, and behave in ways that gain approval. Over time, this process becomes so natural that they forget there was ever another way to exist. But beneath this constant adjustment, something deeper often remains unsettled. Even when a person appears successful or respected, there can still be a quiet feeling that something about their life is not fully authentic. This feeling does not come from failure. It comes from the subtle tension created when someone spends too much energy trying to become what they believe others want them to be. Buddhist wisdom often speaks about this tension in a very gentle but powerful way. It teaches that much of human suffering arises when we lose touch with our natural awareness and begin identifying too strongly with roles, expectations, and labels. When a person forgets who they are beneath those layers, life begins to feel like a performance rather than a genuine experience. The journey toward freedom begins when a person slowly starts letting go of this performance. This does not mean rejecting responsibilities or ignoring the needs of others. Instead, it means reconnecting with the deeper sense of awareness that exists beneath the roles we play in daily life. At first, this reconnection may feel unfamiliar. The mind has spent so many years focusing on approval, success, and identity that simply being yourself can feel uncertain. Questions may arise. What if people do not understand me? What if I am judged? What if being honest about who I am leads to rejection? These fears are natural because human beings are deeply social creatures. From the earliest moments of life, we learn to survive through connection with others, but the problem begins when the desire for acceptance becomes stronger than the connection with our own truth. When someone constantly hides their true thoughts, emotions, or interests in order to please others, they begin living with a subtle inner conflict. On the outside, they appear to fit perfectly into their environment, but on the inside, they feel increasingly distant from themselves. This is why the freedom of being completely yourself is so powerful. It removes that inner conflict. Instead of dividing your energy between who you are and who you think you should be, your mind becomes unified. Your actions begin aligning with your deeper understanding of yourself. This alignment creates a quiet but powerful sense of peace. The Buddha often spoke about the importance of awareness and authenticity in the path toward liberation. He taught that when a person becomes aware of their own mind, they begin seeing how many of their actions are influenced by fear, attachment, and misunderstanding. But once these patterns become visible, the possibility of change appears. For example, imagine someone who has spent many years trying to appear confident because they believe vulnerability is a weakness. They may hide their doubts, avoid honest conversations, and constantly try to maintain an image of strength. But inside, they may feel exhausted from maintaining that image. The moment they allow themselves to be honest about their fears and uncertainties, something begins to change. The energy once used to protect an image becomes available for genuine growth. Instead of pretending to have all the answers, they become open to learning. This openness is not weakness, it is freedom, because when you no longer feel the need to constantly defend an identity, your mind becomes flexible and curious. You can explore new ideas, admit mistakes, and grow without feeling threatened by every challenge. Another important change occurs when you begin living more authentically. Your relationships become deeper and more meaningful. When people interact through carefully constructed identities, conversations often remain superficial. Everyone is protecting their image, so very little honesty appears. But when someone begins expressing their real thoughts and emotions with sincerity, it invites others to do the same. Authenticity has a quiet influence. It encourages honesty in the people around you. This does not mean everyone will always agree with you or understand your perspective. Some people may feel uncomfortable when someone stops following the expectations they once relied on. But the people who truly value connection will appreciate the honesty that authenticity brings. In this way, the freedom of being yourself strengthens the quality of your relationships rather than weakening them. Another beautiful aspect of authenticity is that it simplifies life. When a person constantly tries to maintain different versions of themselves for different situations, the mind becomes busy remembering which identity to present. But when you allow yourself to simply be who you are, that complexity disappears. You no longer need to calculate every word or gesture. You no longer feel the pressure to appear perfect. You become more relaxed because you are no longer performing. This relaxation also improves your ability to face life's challenges. When you are comfortable with your true self, criticism becomes less threatening. You can listen to feedback without feeling that your entire identity is under attack. Instead of reacting defensively, you can calmly consider whether the feedback is useful. If it contains wisdom, you learn from it. If it does not, you allow it to pass without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. This stability is one of the greatest strengths a person can develop. It allows you to move through life with confidence that does not depend on constant approval. At the same time, authenticity also deepens your connection with the present moment. When you are not busy trying to become someone else, your attention naturally returns to what is happening right now. You notice the details of your surroundings more clearly. You listen to conversations more attentively. You experience emotions more honestly without immediately trying to hide them. Life becomes richer because you are actually present for it. Many people spend years chasing the idea of freedom. They believe freedom means having unlimited choices, wealth, or independence from responsibility. But Buddhist wisdom reveals a deeper form of freedom. True freedom is the ability to live without being controlled by fear of judgment or attachment to identity. It is the ability to express your thoughts honestly while remaining compassionate toward others. It is the ability to grow and change without feeling trapped by the labels you once carried. This freedom does not require dramatic external change. It begins quietly inside the mind. Each time you choose honesty instead of pretense, you move closer to it. Each time you accept your humanity instead of rejecting it, you strengthen it. Each time you allow yourself to live authentically, you experience a deeper sense of peace. Eventually, you realize something important. The person you spent so many years trying to become was never more valuable than the person you already are. Your unique perspective, your experiences, your strengths, and even your imperfections form a story that belongs only to you. No one else can live that story in exactly the same way. When you fully accept this truth, comparison loses its power. You stop measuring your life against the lives of others. You begin appreciating the path that is uniquely yours. And with that appreciation comes a quiet confidence. You move forward with curiosity instead of fear. You allow yourself to grow without losing your authenticity. You face life with openness rather than constant defense. In the end, the freedom of being completely yourself is not about rejecting the world around you. It is about living in harmony with your own awareness while participating fully in life. It is the realization that you do not need to hide, pretend, or escape in order to belong. You already belong here, exactly as you are. And the moment you embrace that truth, the mind relaxes into a deeper kind of peace, the peace that comes from living honestly, courageously, and completely as yourself. 17. The final realization: you were never the problem. There is a moment that eventually arrives for many people who walk the path of self-understanding. It does not appear suddenly like a loud revelation, and it does not come with dramatic certainty. Instead, it grows quietly over time as awareness deepens. After years of questioning yourself, doubting your worth, and believing that something about you was incomplete or broken, a different understanding begins to take shape. You slowly begin to realize something that changes the way you see your entire life. You were never the problem. For most of their lives, many people carry a silent belief that something about them is wrong. Perhaps they believe they are not strong enough, not confident enough, not successful enough, or not worthy enough. These beliefs may begin early in life through criticism, comparison, rejection, or misunderstanding. A child may hear certain words repeatedly, experience certain disappointments, or struggle to meet expectations. Over time, the mind begins turning those experiences into conclusions about identity. The child grows into an adult who quietly carries these conclusions within their thoughts. They may believe that they must constantly improve themselves in order to deserve happiness. They may believe that if they could just fix their weaknesses, remove their fears, or become more like others, then they would finally be enough. Because of this belief, life becomes a long attempt to repair something that was never actually broken. Buddhist wisdom invites us to look at this belief carefully. It does not deny that people experience pain, mistakes, confusion, or harmful habits. These experiences are part of being human, but the deeper problem is not the presence of these experiences. The deeper problem is the way the mind interprets them. When someone believes they themselves are the problem, they begin treating their entire identity as something flawed. Instead of seeing challenges as temporary experiences, they see them as proof of personal failure. Instead of recognizing emotions as natural reactions, they interpret them as weaknesses that must be hidden. Over time, this misunderstanding creates a heavy burden. The mind becomes its own critic, constantly monitoring every action and judging every mistake. Even moments of success may feel temporary because the mind expects that eventually the truth about its imperfections will be revealed. But when awareness begins to grow through reflection, meditation, and honest observation, this belief slowly begins to weaken. You begin noticing that the voice of self-criticism is not actually your true self. It is simply a pattern of thinking that developed over time. It is a mental habit formed through experiences, expectations, and fears. Once this becomes visible, something extraordinary happens. The authority that voice once had begins to fade. Instead of believing every critical thought automatically, you begin observing it. You notice when it appears, what triggers it, and how it influences your emotions. Through this awareness, you begin recognizing that the voice of judgment is only one part of your mind, not the whole of who you are. This discovery changes everything. For the first time, you realize that your mind contains many different layers. There are thoughts, emotions, memories, and reactions that come and go. But beneath all these changing experiences, there is something stable: awareness itself. Awareness is the part of you that notices thoughts without being those thoughts. It is the quiet observer that remains present even when emotions rise and fall. This awareness is not broken, not flawed, and not incomplete. It is simply the capacity to experience life. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that this awareness is closer to your true nature than any label or identity you have carried. The labels you adopted, successful, unsuccessful, confident, insecure, strong, weak, are all temporary descriptions shaped by circumstances. They are not permanent truths. Once this understanding becomes clear, the entire relationship you have with yourself begins to shift. You stop treating your life like a constant self-improvement project aimed at fixing something wrong. Instead, you begin seeing growth as a natural process of learning and understanding. Mistakes become lessons rather than proof of failure. Emotions become signals rather than enemies. Challenges become opportunities for awareness rather than threats to identity. The pressure you once felt begins to dissolve because the belief that you must constantly repair yourself is no longer guiding your thoughts. This does not mean life suddenly becomes effortless. Difficult experiences will still occur, and the mind may still fall into old habits from time to time. But the difference is that you now see those habits clearly. Instead of believing the voice of self-doubt, you recognize it as a passing thought. Instead of reacting automatically to fear, you observe it with patience. Instead of rejecting parts of yourself, you meet them with understanding. This shift allows something very important to appear in your life: self-trust. For many people, self-trust has been weakened by years of self-criticism. When the mind constantly doubts its own worth, it becomes difficult to trust its decisions or its path. People look outward for reassurance, approval, and guidance because they do not feel confident in their own inner compass. But as awareness deepens, you begin reconnecting with that inner compass. You learn to listen to your thoughts without being controlled by them. You learn to recognize the difference between fear and intuition. Gradually, decisions begin feeling clearer. You stop overthinking every step. You stop asking everyone else what you should do with your life. Instead, you begin trusting your ability to navigate uncertainty with awareness. Another powerful change happens in how you view your past. Before this realization, many people carry regret about who they used to be. They replay old mistakes in their mind and wish they had acted differently. They may even feel embarrassed about earlier versions of themselves. But once you understand that you were never the problem, your relationship with the past softens. You begin seeing your earlier life with compassion rather than judgment. The person you were at that time was doing the best they could with the awareness they had. They were learning, adapting, and trying to understand the world around them. Without those experiences, you would not have developed the insight you now possess. This realization transforms regret into gratitude. Instead of wishing the past had been different, you recognize that every experience contributed to your growth. And as this understanding deepens, your perspective on the future also changes. You no longer feel the need to control every outcome. You no longer believe that your worth depends on achieving certain milestones. Instead, you approach the future with curiosity. You allow life to unfold while continuing to learn and grow. The fear that once accompanied uncertainty begins to fade because you trust your ability to face whatever appears. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this realization is the peace it brings. For years, the mind may have been searching for peace in achievements, approval, or perfection. But now you see that peace was never waiting at the end of that search. Peace begins the moment the mind stops fighting itself. Peace appears when you understand that you were never the enemy of your own life. You were simply a person learning to understand their mind. And once that understanding arrives, the long struggle with yourself begins to end. Life no longer feels like a battle against your own identity. Instead, it becomes a journey of awareness, growth, and discovery. You move forward with greater patience because you no longer expect perfection. You treat yourself with greater kindness because you understand your humanity. You approach life with greater openness because you are no longer afraid of who you are. And in this quiet realization, a deep truth finally becomes clear. The problem was never you. The problem was only the belief that you needed to become someone else in order to deserve peace. The moment that belief dissolves, you are free to live as you truly are, aware, evolving, and fully capable of walking through life with wisdom, compassion, and a calm mind that no longer needs to escape itself. 18. The quiet power of finally being at peace with yourself. For many people, the journey of life feels like a long search for something that always seems just beyond reach. They search for happiness, stability, approval, and meaning. They believe that if they work hard enough, achieve enough, and fix enough of their flaws, then one day they will finally feel complete. Until that day arrives, they keep pushing themselves forward, constantly trying to improve, change, and become someone better. But beneath this constant effort, there is often a hidden tension. No matter how much progress someone makes, the mind still whispers that something is missing. Even moments of success may feel temporary because the mind quickly begins focusing on the next thing that must be achieved. Peace becomes something postponed until the future. Buddhist wisdom offers a very different perspective on this experience. It teaches that the peace people search for does not come from becoming perfect. It comes from understanding the nature of the mind and learning how to live without constantly fighting yourself. When someone finally begins making peace with themselves, something remarkable happens. The endless pressure that once dominated their thoughts begins to soften. Instead of feeling like life is a race they must win, they begin experiencing life as a process they can participate in with awareness and patience. This change does not happen instantly. It grows slowly as a person learns to observe their mind without constant judgment. They begin noticing the patterns of their thoughts, the habits of their emotions, and the beliefs that once shaped their identity. Over time, they realize that many of the struggles they carried were not caused by the world around them, but by the way the mind was interpreting their experiences. For example, someone may have spent years believing that their worth depended on the approval of others. When people praised them, they felt confident. When they faced criticism or rejection, they felt deeply insecure. Their emotional stability depended entirely on external reactions. But once awareness deepens, they begin recognizing that this pattern is not inevitable. They see how their mind became conditioned to seek validation and how that habit influenced their behavior. Through understanding, the need for constant approval begins losing its power. Instead of asking, "Do others accept me?" they begin asking, "Do I understand and accept myself?" This question marks the beginning of inner peace. When you start accepting yourself honestly, you stop measuring your entire life against impossible standards. You recognize that being human means experiencing both strengths and weaknesses. Instead of trying to eliminate every imperfection, you begin working with your experiences in a more compassionate way. Self-acceptance does not mean ignoring your mistakes or refusing to grow. It simply means acknowledging your humanity without turning it into a reason for self-hatred. With this acceptance comes a new kind of emotional stability. The mind becomes less reactive to every situation because it is no longer constantly defending an identity. You become able to face challenges with greater calmness because your worth is no longer tied to every outcome. Another important shift happens in how you experience your emotions. Before self-acceptance, emotions often feel overwhelming because they are accompanied by judgment. If you feel sadness, the mind might say something is wrong with you. If you feel fear, the mind might interpret it as weakness. But once peace with yourself begins to grow, emotions are experienced differently. You allow yourself to feel them without turning them into personal failures. Sadness becomes something to understand rather than suppress. Fear becomes something to observe rather than deny. This approach allows emotions to move through the mind more naturally. Instead of becoming trapped by them, you learn how to experience them without losing your balance. The Buddha often described the mind as something that can be trained through awareness. Just as a person can strengthen their body through practice, they can strengthen their awareness by observing their thoughts and emotions carefully. Each time you observe your mind with patience instead of judgment, you weaken the habits that once created unnecessary suffering. Gradually, the mind becomes quieter. The constant stream of criticism slows down. The pressure to prove your worth begins to fade. In its place appears something that many people have not felt for a long time, a sense of ease. Ease does not mean that life becomes perfect or free of difficulties. Instead, it means that the mind is no longer constantly resisting reality. When challenges appear, you respond to them with awareness rather than panic. You become more flexible in your thinking. Instead of reacting impulsively, you pause and consider your options. Instead of interpreting every difficulty as a personal failure, you recognize it as part of the natural rhythm of life. This flexibility allows life to feel less heavy. Another powerful change occurs in how you see other people. When someone is constantly judging themselves, they often project that judgment onto others as well. They may compare themselves frequently, feel threatened by others' success, or become defensive in conversations. But when you make peace with yourself, comparison begins to lose its importance. You recognize that every person is walking their own path, shaped by unique experiences and circumstances. Instead of measuring yourself against others, you begin appreciating the individuality of each person's journey. This shift naturally creates compassion. You listen more carefully because you understand that everyone is carrying invisible struggles. You respond more kindly because you know how difficult the path of self-understanding can be. Relationships become more genuine because they are no longer based on competition or insecurity. At the same time, your relationship with time begins to change. Many people live with a sense that time is always running out. They worry about how much they have accomplished or how far they still need to go. This constant pressure makes life feel rushed and incomplete. But when you begin living with greater awareness, the present moment becomes more valuable. You realize that life is not something that begins once everything is solved. It is happening right now. Simple experiences become meaningful again. A quiet walk, a peaceful conversation, or a moment of reflection can bring a sense of contentment that once seemed impossible. This appreciation for the present moment is one of the greatest gifts of inner peace. As this peace grows, you also develop a deeper sense of trust in life itself. Instead of trying to control every detail of the future, you become more comfortable with uncertainty. You understand that life will always contain unexpected changes, but you also recognize that you have the ability to face those changes with awareness. This trust reduces the anxiety that once dominated your thoughts. Instead of constantly imagining worst-case scenarios, you focus on responding wisely to whatever situation arises. Eventually, something beautiful becomes clear. The peace you spent years searching for was never something the world needed to give you. It was something that appeared naturally the moment you stopped fighting yourself. When the mind is no longer trapped in constant self-rejection, a quiet strength begins to grow. You become able to walk through life with honesty, humility, and calmness. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth at every step. You no longer feel that your value depends on becoming someone else. Instead, you move forward with the understanding that growth is a lifelong journey and that every step on that journey has meaning. And in this understanding, you finally experience the quiet power of being at peace with yourself, a peace that does not depend on perfection, approval, or control, but simply on the awareness that you are already enough to continue walking the path of life with courage and clarity. 19. The courage to live without hiding from yourself. There is a quiet form of courage that many people never fully develop, not because they are weak, but because life teaches them to avoid it. This courage is not the courage to fight, compete, or prove something to the world. It is something much deeper and far more personal. It is the courage to live without hiding from yourself. For most of their lives, many people become experts at hiding. They hide their fears behind confidence, their sadness behind forced smiles, and their uncertainty behind carefully chosen words. Over time, this behavior becomes so natural that they forget they are doing it. The mind learns that being accepted by others often requires presenting a version of yourself that feels safe, strong, or impressive. This habit begins early. As children, people quickly learn which behaviors receive praise and which ones lead to criticism or rejection. They notice how approval appears when they meet expectations and how disappointment appears when they do not. Slowly, they begin shaping their behavior around these reactions. At first, this adaptation is simply part of learning how to live in society. But as years pass, the desire for acceptance can grow stronger than the connection with one's true thoughts and emotions. Instead of expressing what they genuinely feel, people begin expressing what they believe will be accepted. This is where the hiding begins. A person may hide their dreams because they fear being judged. They may hide their struggles because they do not want to appear weak. They may hide their questions because they worry about looking foolish. From the outside, everything may appear normal. They may succeed in their career, maintain relationships, and appear confident in social situations. But inside there is often a quiet sense of disconnection, a feeling that the person the world sees is not exactly the person they truly are. Buddhist teachings often speak about this separation between our authentic awareness and the identities we construct. The Buddha did not say that roles or responsibilities are wrong. Instead, he explained that suffering appears when we begin believing that these roles are our entire identity. When the mind clings tightly to an image of who it must be, it becomes afraid of anything that might threaten that image. A mistake becomes terrifying because it might reveal imperfection. A moment of vulnerability feels dangerous because it might expose uncertainty. As a result, people spend enormous amounts of energy protecting their identity. They carefully control their words. They avoid situations where their weaknesses might appear. They try to maintain an image that matches expectations. But maintaining this image becomes exhausting because it requires constant effort. The mind is always monitoring itself, always adjusting, always protecting the version of itself that it believes must be preserved. The courage to stop hiding begins when a person finally becomes aware of this pattern. Awareness does not arrive instantly. It often appears gradually through moments of reflection, meditation, or honest self-examination. A person may begin noticing how much of their life has been shaped by the fear of judgment. They may realize how often they hold back their true thoughts or emotions in order to appear acceptable. At first, this realization can feel uncomfortable. The mind may resist it because it challenges habits that have existed for years. But once awareness begins revealing these patterns, something important becomes possible: choice. Instead of automatically following the old pattern of hiding, you begin asking yourself a simple question: what would it feel like to be honest right now? Honesty in this context does not mean revealing every thought without care or sensitivity. It means allowing yourself to acknowledge what you genuinely feel and think, even if those feelings are imperfect or uncertain. This honesty begins internally. You start by being honest with yourself about your emotions, your fears, and your desires. Instead of pretending certain feelings do not exist, you allow yourself to observe them with curiosity. For example, if you feel anxious about something, you no longer criticize yourself for feeling that way. Instead, you ask what the anxiety is trying to reveal. Is it pointing towards something important? Is it reminding you to prepare or learn something new? When sadness appears, you do not immediately try to hide it or replace it with forced positivity. You allow yourself to feel it and understand where it comes from. This internal honesty begins dissolving the habit of hiding. Once you become comfortable acknowledging your own emotions, expressing them to others becomes easier as well. Conversations become more genuine because you are no longer trying to present a flawless image. Instead of pretending you have all the answers, you can admit when you are learning. Instead of hiding uncertainty, you can express it calmly. Instead of avoiding vulnerability, you can allow others to see your humanity. This shift often strengthens relationships rather than weakening them. When people interact through masks, their connection remains limited. But when someone is willing to be authentic, it invites honesty from others as well. Authenticity has a quiet influence. It encourages trust because people sense that they are interacting with someone real rather than someone performing a role. Another powerful transformation occurs as you practice living without hiding. Your self-respect grows. When you constantly suppress your true thoughts or emotions, a part of your mind knows that you are not being fully honest. This creates a subtle feeling of self-doubt. But when you begin expressing yourself more authentically, you develop a deeper trust in your own voice. You no longer feel that your worth depends on perfect performance. You become comfortable acknowledging both your strengths and your limitations. This self-respect also changes how you respond to criticism. When your identity is built around a fragile image, criticism feels like an attack that must be defended immediately. But when you are comfortable with your authentic self, criticism becomes something you can examine calmly. You listen to the feedback. You consider whether it contains truth. If it does, you learn from it. If it does not, you allow it to pass without letting it define your value. This ability to remain balanced during criticism is a powerful form of freedom. Another change appears in how you experience success and failure. Before authenticity develops, success may feel like validation that your image is working. Failure, on the other hand, may feel like proof that the image has been exposed. But once you stop hiding from yourself, these experiences lose their emotional extremes. Success becomes something to appreciate without becoming attached to it. Failure becomes something to learn from without turning it into self-judgment. Your identity is no longer dependent on outcomes. Instead, it is rooted in awareness and honesty. This stability makes life feel less like a performance and more like a genuine experience. You move through situations with greater calmness because you are no longer constantly trying to protect an image. You speak more freely because you are not afraid of revealing your humanity. You take risks more easily because failure no longer threatens your identity. Perhaps the most important change appears quietly within your mind. The fear of being seen begins to fade. For many years, people fear being fully seen by others because they believe their imperfections will lead to rejection. But once you accept your own imperfections, that fear loses its power. You realize that being human means being imperfect. Everyone carries doubts, fears, and struggles. Everyone is learning as they move through life. Understanding this truth allows compassion to grow, both for yourself and for others. And with that compassion comes a sense of peace that cannot exist while hiding, because hiding requires constant tension. Authenticity allows relaxation. In the end, the courage to live without hiding from yourself is not about dramatic changes or rebellious acts. It is about something quieter and far more meaningful. It is about choosing honesty over pretense. It is about choosing awareness over denial. It is about allowing yourself to exist as a human being rather than a carefully maintained image. And when that courage finally becomes part of your life, something beautiful happens. You begin living with a sense of freedom that does not depend on approval, perfection, or constant control. You become comfortable in your own presence. You move through life with greater clarity and confidence. And, most importantly, you discover that the person you once tried so hard to hide was never someone to be ashamed of. They were simply someone learning how to live honestly, courageously, and fully as themselves. 20. The moment you stop running, your real life finally begins. There comes a quiet turning point in the life of a person who has spent years running from themselves. It does not arrive with loud celebration or dramatic realization. Instead, it begins gently, almost like a slow sunrise that gradually fills the sky with light. After years of chasing approval, escaping uncomfortable emotions, and trying to become someone different, the mind finally pauses. And in that pause, something very important becomes clear. Your real life begins the moment you stop running. For many people, life feels like an endless pursuit of something that always seems just beyond reach. They chase success, recognition, security, love, and a sense of purpose. These pursuits are not wrong. Wanting to grow and improve is a natural part of being human. But the problem arises when all these pursuits are driven by the belief that the person you are right now is not enough. This belief becomes the hidden engine behind much of human behavior. Someone may work endlessly to prove their value because deep down they feel unworthy. Someone else may avoid challenges because they are afraid their weaknesses will be exposed. Another person may constantly compare themselves to others, believing that happiness belongs to those who appear more successful. In each of these situations, the mind is running. It runs from self-doubt, from insecurity, from fear of rejection, and from the belief that something about itself must be fixed before peace can finally appear. But Buddhist wisdom offers a different perspective on this struggle. It teaches that suffering often arises not from the circumstances of life, but from the resistance within the mind. The more we fight our own experience, the heavier life begins to feel. Imagine holding a heavy object with your arms extended for a long time. At first, the weight may feel manageable, but as minutes pass, the strain grows stronger. Eventually, your muscles become exhausted, not only because of the weight itself, but because of the effort required to keep holding it. In the same way, the mind becomes exhausted when it constantly resists itself. Every time you reject your emotions, criticize your thoughts, or compare your life with someone else's path, you add more tension to your mental state. Over time, this tension becomes so familiar that it feels normal. Many people do not even realize how much energy they spend fighting themselves. The moment you stop running from yourself, that tension begins to dissolve. This does not mean your problems instantly disappear. Challenges will still exist. Life will still contain uncertainty, change, and occasional disappointment. But the difference is that you are no longer adding unnecessary resistance to these experiences. Instead of fighting every emotion, you begin observing it. Instead of rejecting your thoughts, you begin understanding them. Instead of trying to escape your humanity, you begin accepting it. This acceptance creates a profound shift in how life feels. Before acceptance, every difficulty appears like an enemy. A mistake feels like proof of failure. A criticism feels like a personal attack. An uncertain future feels like something to fear. But once you stop running from yourself, these same experiences appear differently. Mistakes become lessons. Criticism becomes information. Uncertainty becomes an open space where growth can happen. Your mind becomes more flexible because it is no longer trapped inside rigid expectations about who you must be. Another powerful change occurs in how you experience time. Many people live as if the present moment is simply a waiting room for the future. They believe life will begin once they achieve their goals, once they feel confident enough, or once they become the version of themselves they imagine. But this mindset keeps life permanently postponed. When you stop running from yourself, you realize that life was never waiting somewhere ahead. It has been unfolding in every moment you experienced. Even during the times you wished things were different, the present moment becomes valuable again. You begin noticing small details that were previously invisible: the rhythm of your breathing, the sound of wind moving through trees, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, or the quiet comfort of a meaningful conversation. These experiences may seem simple, but they carry a depth that becomes visible only when the mind is not distracted by constant self-judgment. Another transformation happens in how you see your own identity. For many years, the mind may have told you that you must become someone else in order to deserve peace. It may have created an image of a future self who is more confident, more successful, or more perfect. But once you stop running, you begin understanding something important. Growth does not require rejecting who you are today. It requires understanding who you are today. Instead of trying to erase your weaknesses, you begin learning from them. Instead of denying your fears, you examine what they are trying to teach you. Instead of comparing your path to others, you begin respecting the uniqueness of your journey. This approach makes personal growth much more natural. You are no longer forcing yourself to become someone different. You are allowing your understanding to evolve. The Buddha often emphasized that awareness is the key to transformation. When you observe your mind clearly, you begin seeing the patterns that shape your life. You notice how certain beliefs influence your decisions and how certain habits repeat themselves. Once these patterns become visible, they no longer control you in the same way. You gain the ability to choose differently. For example, if you notice that you often react with anger when someone criticizes you, awareness allows you to pause before responding. Instead of reacting automatically, you can ask whether the criticism contains something valuable or whether it simply reflects someone else's frustration. This small moment of awareness changes everything. It turns automatic reaction into conscious choice. And when many of these small choices accumulate, your entire way of living begins to shift. Relationships also become healthier when you stop running from yourself. When someone constantly rejects parts of themselves, they often seek validation from others to fill that emptiness. They may depend on praise, attention, or reassurance in order to feel secure. But when you begin accepting yourself, that dependency gradually fades. You can still enjoy connection and appreciation, but your sense of worth no longer depends entirely on external approval. This creates more balanced relationships because you are no longer asking others to complete you. Instead, you interact with them from a place of wholeness. Perhaps the most profound realization appears quietly through this entire process. You begin understanding that the person you spent years trying to escape was never your enemy. Your fears were attempts to protect you. Your doubts were signs that you were learning. Your mistakes were steps in the process of becoming wiser. When you see your life from this perspective, compassion naturally replaces judgment. You treat yourself with the same patience you would offer a close friend who is learning something difficult. And through that compassion, the inner battle finally begins to end. Life stops feeling like something you must constantly fix. Instead, it becomes something you can experience fully. You begin moving through each day with greater calmness because you are no longer carrying the weight of constant self-rejection. You become more curious about your experiences because you are no longer afraid of what they might reveal. You develop a quiet confidence that does not depend on perfection, and eventually, one simple truth becomes clear. The life you were searching for was never hiding somewhere outside of you. It begins the moment you stop running. It begins the moment you accept your humanity. It begins the moment you allow yourself to live honestly, imperfectly, and fully present in the experience of being alive. That moment is not waiting in the future. It is here, right now, in the quiet awareness that appears when the mind finally realizes it no longer needs to escape itself in order to find peace. 21. The deep calm that appears when you stop fighting yourself. For most of their lives, many people live with a quiet tension inside their mind. It may not always be obvious, but it is almost always present. This tension comes from a constant internal struggle. The mind is always trying to improve, control, correct, and defend itself. It judges thoughts, rejects emotions, compares achievements, and worries about the future. Day after day, this invisible battle continues, often without the person even realizing how exhausting it has become. People believe this struggle is necessary. They think that without constant pressure, they will stop improving, lose motivation, or fall behind in life. Because of this belief, they keep pushing themselves harder. They criticize their mistakes, replay embarrassing memories, and imagine all the ways things could go wrong. The mind becomes a place of endless correction, as if it must always be fixed before peace can appear. But Buddhist wisdom offers a very different understanding of the mind. It teaches that the deepest calm does not appear when everything in life becomes perfect. Instead, it appears when the mind stops fighting itself. At first, this idea may seem strange. Most people have been taught that growth requires constant self-criticism. They believe that if they relax their expectations, even slightly, they will lose discipline. But this belief misunderstands the difference between awareness and conflict. When the mind fights itself, it divides its energy. One part of the mind becomes the critic, while another part becomes the target of criticism. One part demands perfection, while another part struggles to meet those demands. This division creates tension that slowly drains emotional and mental strength. But when awareness replaces criticism, the division disappears. Instead of attacking your thoughts, you observe them. Instead of rejecting emotions, you acknowledge them. Instead of demanding perfection, you allow growth to unfold naturally. This shift is subtle but powerful. The moment the mind stops treating itself like an enemy, something begins to soften. The inner pressure that once dominated your thinking begins to loosen. This is where deep calm begins to appear. Calm does not mean that your mind becomes completely silent or empty. Thoughts will still arise, and emotions will still appear. But the relationship you have with those experiences changes dramatically. Imagine watching clouds moving slowly across the sky. Some clouds are light and gentle, while others are dark and heavy. But the sky itself remains unchanged. It does not struggle against the clouds or try to control them. It simply allows them to pass. The mind can learn to behave in a similar way. Thoughts are like clouds passing through awareness. Some thoughts bring joy, while others bring worry or sadness. When the mind fights these thoughts, they often grow stronger because attention feeds them. But when you observe thoughts calmly without reacting immediately, they begin losing their intensity. They appear, exist for a moment, and then fade. This ability to observe thoughts without becoming trapped by them is one of the most important skills developed through mindfulness and Buddhist practice. The Buddha often taught that awareness itself is liberating. When you clearly see how your mind works, many of the habits that once controlled you begin dissolving naturally. For example, imagine someone who often becomes angry when others disagree with them. Before developing awareness, that anger might appear instantly and lead to harsh words or defensive reactions. The person may feel justified in the moment, but afterward they might regret their response. With awareness, the process begins changing. The moment disagreement occurs, the person notices the rising tension in their body and the thoughts forming in their mind. Instead of reacting immediately, they pause. That pause creates space. In that space, they can choose a different response. They may still feel frustration, but they no longer feel controlled by it. They can listen more carefully and respond calmly instead of reacting impulsively. Over time, these small moments of awareness begin transforming the entire pattern of behavior. Another important change occurs when you stop fighting yourself. Your emotional resilience becomes stronger. Before this shift, difficult emotions often feel overwhelming. Fear can create panic, sadness can create helplessness, and uncertainty can create anxiety. The mind becomes trapped inside these emotional storms because it tries to escape them or suppress them. But when awareness replaces resistance, emotions are experienced differently. Instead of running away from fear, you observe it. Instead of suppressing sadness, you allow yourself to feel it without judgment. Instead of resisting uncertainty, you accept that not everything in life can be controlled. This acceptance does not make emotions disappear instantly, but it allows them to move through your mind without becoming permanent burdens. Like waves in the ocean, emotions rise and fall naturally when they are not resisted. Another remarkable effect of this calm is clarity. When the mind is constantly fighting itself, it becomes confused and scattered. Decisions feel complicated because fear and self-doubt interfere with clear thinking. But when calmness appears, the mind becomes more focused. You can examine situations more carefully without rushing to conclusions. You can listen to others without immediately defending your position. You can make choices based on understanding rather than impulse. This clarity improves every area of life. Work becomes more effective because your attention is not divided by constant self-criticism. Relationships become healthier because you respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. Personal growth becomes easier because mistakes are treated as opportunities to learn rather than reasons for shame. Perhaps the most powerful transformation occurs in how you see yourself. For many years, the mind may have believed that something about you was fundamentally wrong. It may have told you that you were not good enough, not disciplined enough, or not successful enough. But when the struggle inside your mind begins to fade, a different perspective appears. You begin seeing yourself with greater compassion. You recognize that every human being experiences confusion, fear, and uncertainty at times. You understand that growth is a gradual process rather than an instant transformation. This understanding removes the harsh judgment that once dominated your thoughts. Instead of constantly correcting yourself, you begin supporting your own development. Instead of focusing on your flaws, you begin recognizing your strengths and potential. Another beautiful change appears in how you experience the world. When the mind is filled with internal conflict, it becomes difficult to appreciate simple moments. Even during peaceful situations, the mind may be busy replaying past events or worrying about the future. But when calmness becomes part of your awareness, the present moment begins revealing its richness. You notice the sound of wind moving through trees. You feel the warmth of sunlight more deeply. You listen to conversations with genuine attention. Life becomes more vivid because your mind is no longer distracted by constant self-conflict. This calm also creates a deeper sense of trust. You begin trusting your ability to face challenges without panic. You trust your capacity to learn from mistakes. You trust that even difficult experiences can contribute to your understanding. This trust replaces the fear that once controlled many of your decisions. Instead of avoiding uncertainty, you become willing to explore it. Instead of protecting yourself from every possible failure, you allow yourself to grow through experience. Eventually, something very important becomes clear. The calm you were searching for was never something that the outside world needed to give you. It was always waiting beneath the layers of tension created by self-conflict. The moment you stop fighting your own thoughts and emotions, the mind naturally returns to a state of balance. This balance is not fragile. It does not disappear the moment life becomes challenging. It remains present as long as awareness continues guiding your responses. And through this calm awareness, you begin living with a sense of peace that is not dependent on perfection, success, or control. It is simply the peace that appears when the mind finally understands that it no longer needs to struggle against itself in order to experience life fully. 22. The silent strength of accepting your entire self. There is a quiet kind of strength that many people overlook because it does not look dramatic or powerful from the outside. It is not the strength of physical force, loud confidence, or constant success. Instead, it is the silent strength that appears when a person finally accepts their entire self without hiding, denying, or fighting against parts of who they are. This strength does not demand attention, yet it transforms the way a person experiences life. For much of their lives, many people believe that in order to be accepted, respected, or loved, they must carefully control which parts of themselves they reveal to the world. They show their achievements but hide their fears. They speak about their strengths but remain silent about their struggles. Over time, this habit becomes so natural that they forget they are doing it. This behavior often begins during childhood. Children quickly learn which behaviors receive praise and which ones lead to criticism. They learn that being confident may bring approval, while admitting fear may bring judgment. As they grow older, they carry these lessons with them. They become skilled at presenting the version of themselves that seems most acceptable. At first, this may appear harmless. After all, Learning how to behave appropriately in society is part of growing up. But problems arise when this habit turns into self-rejection. Instead of simply adjusting behavior in certain situations, people begin believing that the parts of themselves they hide are somehow wrong or unacceptable. They may believe their sadness is weakness, their anxiety is failure, or their uncertainty is proof that they are not capable enough. Because of these beliefs, they begin fighting against these experiences. They try to suppress emotions, ignore fears, and avoid situations where their vulnerability might appear. But this internal struggle slowly creates exhaustion. When a person constantly fights parts of themselves, the mind becomes divided. One part of the mind becomes the critic, while another part becomes the target of criticism. This conflict drains emotional energy and prevents genuine peace from appearing. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true strength does not come from eliminating every weakness. Instead, it comes from understanding and accepting the full range of human experience. According to this perspective, fear, sadness, doubt, and confusion are not enemies that must be destroyed. They are simply natural parts of being human. When someone begins accepting their entire self, including the parts they once rejected, the internal conflict begins to dissolve. Acceptance does not mean giving up on growth or improvement. Instead, it means recognizing that growth happens most effectively when the mind is not trapped in self-hatred. When you stop fighting yourself, you create space for understanding. For example, imagine someone who struggles with anxiety. For many years, they may criticize themselves for feeling nervous in social situations or when facing challenges. They may believe that if they were stronger or more confident, they would not experience these feelings. But when they begin accepting their anxiety rather than rejecting it, something important changes. Instead of treating anxiety as a flaw, they begin examining it with curiosity. They ask questions such as, when does this feeling appear? What thoughts accompany it? What situations make it stronger? Through this awareness, anxiety becomes easier to understand. They may realize that their nervousness comes from a desire to do well or from past experiences that shaped their reactions. Once the cause becomes visible, the emotion loses much of its mysterious power. Gradually, the person begins developing new ways of responding to those feelings. Confidence grows naturally because understanding replaces self-criticism. This example illustrates an important truth. The parts of yourself that you reject most strongly are often the parts that need understanding the most. Acceptance allows that understanding to appear. Another powerful transformation occurs when you accept your entire self. Your relationship with mistakes begins to change. Many people treat mistakes as evidence that they are not good enough. When something goes wrong, they replay the event repeatedly in their mind, criticizing every detail of their behavior. This habit creates unnecessary suffering because it turns temporary experiences into permanent judgments about identity. But when acceptance becomes part of your mindset, mistakes are seen differently. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" you begin asking, "What can this experience teach me?" This shift changes the emotional weight of failure. Mistakes become opportunities for learning rather than sources of shame. You become more willing to take risks and try new things because failure no longer threatens your sense of self-worth. Another area of life that changes significantly through self-acceptance is relationships. When someone rejects parts of themselves, they often become overly sensitive to the opinions of others. Criticism may feel devastating, while praise may feel necessary for emotional stability. This dependency on external validation can create fragile relationships because the person constantly seeks reassurance. But when you accept your own humanity, you become less dependent on constant approval. You still value respect and kindness from others, but your sense of worth no longer depends entirely on their reactions. This stability creates healthier connections. You listen more openly because you are not afraid of disagreement. You express your thoughts honestly because you are not trying to maintain a perfect image. You respond with patience because you understand that everyone is learning and evolving. Relationships become deeper because they are based on authenticity rather than performance. Another beautiful aspect of accepting your entire self is the peace it brings to the present moment. When people reject parts of themselves, their mind often escapes into the past or future. They may replay old mistakes repeatedly, wishing they had behaved differently, or they may worry constantly about future situations where their weaknesses might appear. But when acceptance grows stronger, the present moment becomes more comfortable. You no longer feel the need to constantly escape into memories or predictions. Instead, you experience life more directly. Simple moments become meaningful again. A peaceful walk, a quiet conversation, or a moment of reflection can bring genuine calmness. This calmness is not dependent on external conditions. It comes from the absence of internal conflict. You are no longer fighting yourself. Instead, you are allowing your experiences to unfold while observing them with awareness. Over time, this approach builds a deeper kind of confidence. This confidence is not based on perfection or constant success. Instead, it comes from trusting your ability to face life honestly. You know that you can handle difficult emotions without being overwhelmed. You know that mistakes will not destroy your worth. You know that uncertainty is part of the human journey rather than something to fear. This quiet confidence becomes one of the strongest forms of resilience. Even when life becomes challenging, you remain grounded because you are no longer at war with yourself. Eventually, something deeply important becomes clear. The parts of yourself you once tried to hide were never enemies. They were simply aspects of your humanity waiting to be understood. By accepting them, you transform them. Fear becomes courage. Doubt becomes curiosity. Pain becomes wisdom. This transformation is not achieved through force, but through awareness and compassion. It is the silent strength that grows when the mind stops rejecting itself. And when that strength becomes part of your life, something remarkable happens. You begin moving through the world with a calm presence that others can feel. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself constantly. You become comfortable in your own company. You approach life with patience and understanding rather than fear and resistance. In this way, the silent strength of accepting your entire self becomes one of the most powerful forms of freedom a human being can experience. It allows you to live honestly. It allows you to grow naturally. And most importantly, it allows you to experience life with a peace that comes not from perfection, but from the simple and profound realization that being human, with all its complexity and imperfection, is already enough. Now, 23 write more. Long write on 17000 Cracter. Make sure on 17000 Cracter. Asha Sen. The day you stop judging yourself is the day your mind becomes free. There is a quiet habit that shapes the lives of many people without them even realizing it. It is not something visible like work, relationships, or achievements. Instead, it exists silently inside the mind. It is the habit of constantly judging yourself. From the moment people wake up in the morning until the moment they fall asleep at night, their mind is often evaluating everything they do. They judge their thoughts, their emotions, their appearance, their decisions, and their performance. If something goes wrong, the mind quickly criticizes. If something does not meet expectations, the mind points out the failure. This inner voice can become so familiar that people begin believing it is simply part of who they are. Many people think that this voice is necessary. They believe self-judgment keeps them disciplined and motivated. They fear that if they stop criticizing themselves, they will become careless or lazy. Because of this belief, they continue feeding the voice of judgment day after day. But Buddhist wisdom offers a powerful insight about this habit. It teaches that the mind becomes free, not through constant judgment, but through understanding. The problem with self-judgment is not that it notices mistakes. Awareness of mistakes can be helpful. The problem is that judgment turns every mistake into a personal attack on your identity. Instead of saying, "This action did not work," the mind says, "Something is wrong with me." Instead of saying, "I made a mistake," the mind says, "I am a failure." This difference may seem small, but it has a powerful impact on the way a person experiences life. When judgment becomes the dominant voice in the mind, even small problems begin feeling overwhelming. A minor mistake can ruin an entire day because the mind continues replaying it again and again. Instead of learning from the experience and moving forward, the person becomes trapped in self-criticism. This pattern slowly weakens confidence and motivation. The mind begins avoiding challenges because it fears the harsh judgment that will follow if something goes wrong. Over time, people may limit their own potential simply to protect themselves from their inner critic. But something remarkable happens when a person begins observing this habit carefully. They start noticing that the voice of judgment is not actually necessary for growth. In fact, growth often becomes easier when judgment is replaced with awareness. Imagine a teacher who constantly insults their students for every mistake they make. Instead of encouraging learning, this approach would create fear and anxiety. Students would become afraid to ask questions or try new ideas because they would worry about being humiliated. Now imagine a teacher who calmly explains mistakes and encourages improvement. In this environment, students feel safe enough to explore, experiment, and grow. The mind works in a similar way. When the inner voice constantly attacks every mistake, the mind becomes tense and defensive. But when awareness replaces judgment, the mind becomes curious and open to learning. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize mindfulness rather than self-criticism. Mindfulness allows you to observe your thoughts and actions without immediately labeling them as good or bad. For example, if you become angry in a conversation, judgment might say, "I should not feel this way. I am a terrible person." But mindfulness observes the situation differently. It says, "Anger has appeared in my mind. Let me understand why." This approach creates space for reflection instead of conflict. You begin examining the thoughts and emotions behind your reaction. Perhaps you realize that the anger came from feeling misunderstood or disrespected. Perhaps it was influenced by stress or exhaustion. Once you understand the cause, the emotion becomes easier to work with. Instead of repeating the same reaction again and again, you gain the opportunity to respond differently next time. This is the difference between judgment and awareness. Judgment creates shame. Awareness creates wisdom. Another important change happens when you stop judging yourself constantly. Your relationship with your emotions becomes healthier. Many people believe that certain emotions are unacceptable. They think feeling sadness, fear, or insecurity means they are weak. Because of this belief, they try to suppress these feelings, but suppressed emotions rarely disappear. Instead, they remain in the mind and often grow stronger over time. When you stop judging your emotions, you allow them to be experienced without turning them into problems. Sadness becomes something you can feel and understand, rather than something you must hide. Fear becomes something you can observe and learn from, rather than something you must deny. Even joy becomes easier to experience, because the mind is no longer constantly analyzing whether it deserves happiness. This acceptance allows emotions to move naturally through your awareness, instead of becoming trapped inside it. Another area where freedom appears is in your relationship with the past. Self-judgment often keeps people trapped in old memories. They replay mistakes repeatedly, wishing they had made different decisions. The mind may create endless what-if scenarios that lead nowhere, but when judgment fades, the past begins to look different. Instead of seeing old mistakes as proof of failure, you begin seeing them as steps in your learning process. Every experience, even the painful ones, contributed to your understanding. Without those experiences, the wisdom you now carry would not exist. This perspective allows forgiveness to appear. You forgive yourself not because the past was perfect, but because you recognize that you were learning with the awareness you had at the time. This forgiveness releases a tremendous amount of emotional weight. Your mind becomes lighter because it no longer carries the burden of endless regret. Another transformation occurs in how you relate to other people. When someone constantly judges themselves, they often judge others as well. The mind becomes used to evaluating everything through a critical lens. But when self-judgment fades, compassion naturally grows. You begin recognizing that everyone is learning, struggling, and evolving just like you. Instead of reacting with irritation or superiority, you respond with patience and understanding. This shift improves relationships because people feel safe expressing themselves around someone who does not immediately judge them. At the same time, your confidence becomes more stable. Confidence based on perfection is fragile. It depends on everything going well all the time. The moment something goes wrong, that confidence collapses. But confidence based on self-acceptance is much stronger. You know that mistakes will happen, but they will not destroy your sense of worth. You know that criticism may appear, but it does not define your identity. This stability allows you to move through life with greater courage. You become more willing to try new things. You take risks that once felt too intimidating. You explore opportunities that you might have avoided before. And through these experiences, your understanding continues growing. Perhaps the most beautiful realization appears quietly as this process unfolds. You begin understanding that your mind was never meant to be a courtroom where every action is judged. It was meant to be a place of awareness, learning, and growth. When the habit of judgment disappears, your mind finally begins experiencing the freedom it always had the potential to discover. Thoughts can appear without immediately becoming criticism. Emotions can arise without turning into shame. Experiences can unfold without constant resistance. Life begins to feel less like a test you must pass and more like a journey you are exploring. You stop trying to become perfect. Instead, you become present, and in that presence, a quiet freedom appears. The day you stop judging yourself is the day your mind finally begins to relax. It is the day you realize that you do not need to constantly prove your worth. You only need to live with awareness, honesty, and compassion, because true freedom does not come from eliminating every flaw. It comes from understanding that you were never meant to fight yourself in the first place. 24. The freedom that appears when you no longer need to prove yourself. For a very large part of life, many people live with an invisible pressure that quietly shapes nearly everything they do. It is not always obvious, and often they are not even aware of it. Yet this pressure influences their decisions, their relationships, and the way they see themselves. It is the constant feeling that they must prove something. Some people feel they must prove their intelligence. Others feel they must prove their strength, their success, their worth, or their value to others. Even small moments in daily life can become part of this silent effort. A conversation becomes an opportunity to appear knowledgeable. A mistake becomes something that must be hidden. A success becomes something that must be displayed so others recognize it. Over time, this constant need to prove oneself can become exhausting. The mind is always performing, always evaluating, always measuring whether it has demonstrated enough value to deserve respect or acceptance. Many people believe this pressure is necessary. They think that without it, they would lose motivation or fall behind in life. But Buddhist wisdom offers a deeper understanding of this pattern. It teaches that the desire to prove yourself often comes from a misunderstanding about your own worth. When a person believes their value depends on the opinions of others, they begin building their identity around those opinions. Instead of living according to their own awareness, they begin living according to what they believe others expect. At first, this may seem harmless. After all, society encourages people to succeed and gain recognition. But the deeper problem arises when someone believes their worth as a human being is determined by how well they perform. This belief creates endless pressure because there is always something more to prove. Even when someone achieves success, the mind may immediately begin worrying about losing that success. Even when someone receives praise, they may wonder whether they will be able to maintain that image in the future. In this way, the need to prove oneself becomes a cycle that never fully ends. Buddhist teachings gently point out that true freedom begins when a person recognizes that their worth does not come from constant demonstration. Your value does not increase when others praise you, and it does not disappear when someone criticizes you. Your value exists simply because you are alive and capable of awareness. This understanding changes the way you move through the world. Instead of treating every situation as a performance, you begin experiencing life more naturally. Imagine a conversation where you no longer feel the need to impress the other person. You can listen without constantly thinking about how to appear intelligent. You can speak honestly without carefully constructing every sentence to protect an image. This kind of interaction feels lighter because your mind is not busy defending your identity. Another example appears in the way you approach challenges. When someone believes they must prove their worth, failure becomes extremely frightening. A mistake does not simply represent a learning experience. It feels like evidence that they are not capable enough. Because of this fear, they may avoid situations where failure is possible. They may stay in comfortable environments where their abilities are rarely questioned. But when you stop needing to prove yourself, failure loses much of its emotional weight. Mistakes become information rather than judgment. You can explore new opportunities without feeling that your identity is at risk. You begin seeing challenges as opportunities to learn rather than tests you must pass. This shift greatly expands the range of experiences available to you. Another area where this freedom becomes visible is in your relationship with success. Before this understanding appears, success may feel like something that confirms your value. Achievements bring temporary relief because they silence the voice of self-doubt for a short time. But once you no longer need to prove yourself, success takes on a different meaning. Instead of using achievements to validate your identity, you begin appreciating them as expressions of your effort and creativity. You can celebrate accomplishments without becoming attached to them. If circumstances change and success fades, your sense of worth remains stable. This stability creates a deeper kind of confidence. Confidence that comes from proving yourself is fragile because it depends on constant performance. But confidence that comes from self-understanding is much more resilient. You know that your value does not disappear when things go wrong. Another transformation occurs in how you see other people. When someone constantly tries to prove their worth, they often compare themselves to others. Every interaction becomes an unconscious competition. If someone else appears more successful, the mind may feel threatened. If someone else struggles, the mind may feel temporary relief. But when the need to prove yourself fades, comparison begins to lose its importance. You recognize that each person is walking their own path, shaped by different experiences and circumstances. Instead of competing with others, you become curious about their journeys. Instead of feeling threatened by their achievements, you can genuinely appreciate them. This shift makes relationships healthier because they are no longer based on hidden competition. People feel more comfortable around someone who does not constantly try to demonstrate superiority. At the same time, your relationship with yourself becomes more peaceful. When the mind no longer demands constant proof of worth, the internal pressure begins to dissolve. You stop measuring every moment of your life against unrealistic expectations. You allow yourself to rest without feeling guilty. You allow yourself to learn without feeling embarrassed. You allow yourself to grow without feeling rushed. This relaxation does not lead to laziness, as some people fear. Instead, it often leads to more authentic motivation. When actions are not driven by the need to prove yourself, they become guided by curiosity and interest. You pursue goals because they genuinely matter to you, not because they validate your identity. This kind of motivation tends to be more sustainable and fulfilling. Another beautiful change appears in how you experience the present moment. When someone constantly tries to prove themselves, their attention is usually focused on the future. They think about what they must achieve next or how they will maintain their reputation. But when this pressure fades, the present moment becomes more visible. You notice the small details of everyday life that once passed unnoticed. The sound of laughter during a conversation, the calmness of a quiet evening, the satisfaction of completing a task simply because it mattered to you. These moments become meaningful because your mind is no longer distracted by constant evaluation. You are finally able to experience life rather than perform for it. Perhaps the most important realization appears gradually through this process. You begin understanding that the person you were trying to prove yourself to was often an imagined audience inside your mind. You were trying to meet standards that were never truly defined. You were chasing approval that could never fully satisfy the voice of doubt. When this realization becomes clear, the entire struggle begins to dissolve. You stop running in circles trying to demonstrate your worth. You begin standing calmly in your own awareness. And from that awareness, a new kind of freedom appears. It is the freedom to speak honestly, the freedom to learn without shame, the freedom to grow without pressure, the freedom to live without constantly proving that you deserve to exist. This freedom does not make you careless or indifferent. Instead, it makes you authentic. You act with integrity because it reflects your understanding, not because it protects an image. You pursue growth because you are curious about life, not because you are trying to escape self-doubt. You move through the world with a calm confidence that does not depend on applause or recognition. And in this calm confidence, something becomes beautifully clear. You never needed to prove your worth in the first place. Your value was never something that had to be demonstrated again and again. It was already present, quietly waiting for the moment when you would finally stop performing and begin living as the person you truly are. When you look back at all these lessons, a single truth slowly becomes clear. For most of life, the greatest struggle was never the outside world. It was the quiet battle happening inside the mind. The fear of not being enough, the pressure to prove yourself, the habit of judging every thought and emotion, and the endless effort to become someone different created a life that often felt heavy and exhausting. But the moment you begin understanding your mind with awareness and compassion, everything starts to change. You realize that running from yourself never brought peace. It only created more confusion. The more you tried to escape your fears, doubts, and imperfections, the stronger they seemed to become. But when you finally turn toward yourself with honesty and patience, those same experiences begin losing their power. Self-acceptance does not mean becoming perfect. It means understanding that being human already includes mistakes, growth, and learning. When you stop treating your life like a problem that must be fixed, your mind begins to relax. The pressure to constantly prove your worth slowly fades, and in that quiet space, something beautiful appears. Clarity, peace, and a deeper understanding of who you truly are. You begin to see that your thoughts are not your identity. Your emotions are not your weaknesses. Your past mistakes are not permanent definitions of your future. They are simply experiences that helped shape your understanding. The more awareness grows, the more life begins to feel like a journey rather than a struggle. You stop measuring your worth through comparison. You stop waiting for the future to bring happiness. Instead, you begin living more fully in the present moment. Small moments start becoming meaningful again. Conversations feel deeper, silence feels calmer. Even challenges become opportunities to grow rather than threats to your identity. Most importantly, you discover that the peace you were searching for was never hidden somewhere far away. It was always inside the awareness that appears when the mind stops fighting itself. The Buddha taught that liberation does not come from changing the entire world. It comes from understanding the mind that experiences the world. And once you understand your mind, something remarkable happens. You stop running. You stop hiding. You stop trying to become someone else. Instead, you begin walking through life with honesty, awareness, and compassion for yourself and others. And in that moment, you realize something deeply important. The person you spent so many years searching for was never missing. They were quietly waiting within you the entire time.